We have a new one for you guys today, and it is amazing. With art done by Mora, who is currently drawing Batman and Superman World's Finest. If you're a fan of adventure, action, and bounty hunters slash monster hunters, this is the series for you. So get your popcorn, get your drinks, get comfortable, because this one is a banger, and you're going to want to be a part of this. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube. I would appreciate it so much. Now let's get into it. Every good story starts out with a death, and this one is no different. We're introduced to a gentleman and a young lady. Well, she isn't young, but she's drawn to look a little bit young. The gentleman has something to show her because we discover that he is an excavator and he found something that he just wanted to show to everyone. But she was the first person to lay eyes on it aside from him. This is because she knew the exact value of this item, a scabbard. And this scabbard wasn't just an ordinary scabbard, no. This scabbard was one of legend. With one glance, she knew it was real. So she made a call, confirming it was real. But this didn't sit right with the excavator, asking her what her name was because of his excitement, he forgot to ask this person who she was and where she was from. He just wanted to show it off. But that was his mistake, because a group of men entered the tent and they looked like they meant business. Stepping forward without even looking at the excavator, they just picked up the scabbard and proceeded to leave. But he stopped them, and that was his biggest mistake, because one of the men wasn't even playing. He just pulled out a Glock, aiming it at this man's head. He said, "Please, don't kill me. I have a family. What do you want?" And he answered him, "England back," before pulling a trigger and ending his life. Somewhere in England, though, we see a retirement home where old people reside. And we see one woman. She wasn't your ordinary woman because, for one, she was rolling a joint. They wanted to turn off the TV, but they left it because of her. And on the news, they reported that someone had died after discovering a scabbard. And she knew, yeah, I'm gonna need to leave for a second. But this was when we see our main character, Duncan. God, I love Duncan, no homo. Because for one, he was drawn by Mora, so he looks good. And he was abnormally awkward around people. Because right now he was on a date. And he was so flustered he spilled red wine on her white dress. The date was going to shit. But before he could even wipe down the wine, he got a call from the home. Apparently his grandmother had run away. Everyone thinks she has dementia, but she really doesn't. His date thought he wanted to fake and run away, but he really wasn't doing that. He was all she had, and she had raised him alone since he was a child, so he had to look after his grandmother. And just before he could call the home back, his grandmother called him. She explained to him that she was lost and she needed his help. So Duncan, being the good kid that he is, goes to save his grandmother, who clearly knows what she's doing. He explained to his date and she understood. She was an understanding girl. So he set off to save his grandmother in the middle of nowhere. But when he met her, she was busy trying to open a chest buried beneath the ground. Looking at his grandmother and seeing that this was important to her, he decided to help her. Grabbing onto the crowbar and yanking with all of his strength, the chest flew open, and what he saw shocked him to the core of his being. It was a chest filled to the brim with different forms of weaponry, from guns to daggers to swords. He was shocked because any other person seeing this would think, hey, my grandmother is a serial killer. But she really wasn't. Jumping in, he saw a big-ass gun with wooden stakes. And she told him, nah, you can leave that behind. We don't need it. There are no other vampires around. Shocked, he said, what do you mean? She smiled, because I hunted them to extinction. Duncan felt quiet, because he knew that all this was crazy. Is my grandmother insane? But before he could ask her, she turned back very quickly. Apparently she had noticed something. She asked him, my hearing is not so good. Do you hear something? And he made it clear. Yes, I hear barking like dogs, but they're muffled. and she just sat down because she knew it was too late, asking her grandson, "Boy, have you heard about the questing beast?" He turned around. "Grandma, you'd never even let me watch Scooby-Doo. I don't know what a questing beast is." She laughed and said, "Well, now you do." Standing behind them was a big, hulking behemoth monster with the head of a king cobra and body of a lion. That was a questing beast. He asked his grandma, "Grandma, what do we do?" Well, she just told him to run, and he was obedient because he ran with all of his strength while being chased down by this monster. She shouted to him, "Keep it busy," and she rummaged through her chest looking for something, one weapon that could stop this monster, and Duncan was running for his life. But when his grandma found it, she told him to bring the monster back, and Duncan was obedient because he stood before this great beast and ran directly at it. Any other person would have been scared out of their mind, but nah, not Duncan. He grabbed onto a wooden bark of a tree and shoved it into the monster's mouth, stopping it from closing its jaw. Using the opportunity, he snuck underneath the monster and ran directly at his grandmother. But the monster was strong. It shattered the bark. Now, more angry than ever, Duncan had reached his grandmother expecting to get a shotgun, but she just tossed him a spear. He was worried. What am I supposed to do with this spear? It's a big monster. So he did what he could, aiming the spear tip at the monster. And the monster just stopped, mesmerized by this spear. And he walked away. Duncan saw this and he wanted to end the monster right here, right now. But his grandmother told him no. It's pointless. It's a monster of destiny. Its death has already been foreseen, and it's not going to die by your hand. It will be back at a very inconvenient time. But Duncan right now, Duncan was processing because none of this makes sense. "Grandmother, what do you mean? What is this? What is this world?" You did like all mentors do and told him it's your destiny to save the world. But Duncan, he wasn't going for it. He had a hot date. But his grandmother just pulled out a gun and said, "Yeah, you're going to do this." He laughed. "You raised me alone. There is no way you're going to shoot lamb." She took out his ear. Half of his hair was gone. And that is when he knew she wasn't playing. So he carried the bag of weaponry to his car. And she explained to him that right now the world is in danger. They found the scabbard. Confused, Duncan asked, "What scabbard?" And she explained, "A scabbard that has the ability to heal. It is a very beautiful scabbard, but for some reason people only care about the sword." And he asked, "What sword?" And she explained, "Excalibur, of course." Duncan fell silent again. "Excalibur is real? King Arthur's sword is real?" She said no. That sword didn't belong to King Arthur. It was for the Lady of the Lake. But now, with Excalibur, they're going to bring King Arthur back from the dead. Duncan asked, "Isn't King Arthur a good guy?" She said, "Oh, my adorable Duncan. Everybody knows about how Arthur saved Britain and united it and fought back the foreign invaders. But they all forget what he did after that. He laid siege to the European Empire and crushed it to dust. Arthur was promised to come back during England's dark days, but her and some others believe he would bring the dark days. As we see, those evil guys had found Arthur's remains. It's about to get crazy. We are back with Once in Future, a beautiful, chaotic, batshit crazy story about stories. If you are not a fan of pure chaos, violence, and action, just leave, because this story is not for you. We're going to see how things will play out if King Arthur himself was the demon god. So please like and subscribe so you don't lose track of all my videos. Alright, let's get into it. Okay, so we pick up our story and where we left off in the last video. Our boy, Duncan, being threatened by his grandmother, and the first thing he asked her is why? Why didn't you tell me about all of this sooner? Why did you keep it to yourself till now? And she simply replied back, "I did it for your state of mind. Imagine how messed up your life would be if you were afraid of your own shadow, afraid of all the monsters that lurked in the night." But he wasn't impressed Because right now, the only person he cared for in the world was pointing a gun at his back. This is not a better situation, grandmother. And what was with that monster, the questing beast? She just smiled. Well, you're going on your first quest. What did you expect? The way she was so straightforward and blunt was so funny. Anyways, they had arrived at their location, where King Arthur's remains stood. And right now, they had to be quick because the wolves were here, standing at the entrance with the ladies of the lake. His grandmother told him not to make eye contact because that was rude. While they came through, the wolves were already ravaging the corpse or trying to open the casket of King Arthur. And he was pissed off that the lady he came with was not watching all this take place. This was a holy moment. This was a real moment you're supposed to observe, honestly. And when the coffin was open, they saw him, their king, their new king. In silence, she just carried the scabbard and dropped it next to her king. The scabbard who has the ability to heal everything to completion. So, he was going to be brought back. And right now, Granny had no time to threaten her grandson, giving him a machine gun because he is going to need it for what comes next. Because the king has risen. Without a word, he tried to communicate, but none of them spoke this dialect of English. Granny came through and saw, but what she saw shook her to her bone. This should not be. He should not be awake. The scabbard had already started regenerating his muscles. The king just stretched his hand and pulled out a sword from the wall. Whipping this sword, he was almost complete. The regeneration was slow, but he was healing. His heart had returned, his gut, his muscle. He was here, standing before his new subjects. They all bowed a knee, but he didn't care. Whipping out the sword, he grabbed one of their arms and drew blood. Imagine you are unable to move, and he just grabs you and draws blood with the rusty swords and tastes it. And with one taste, you ask yourself, why did he do that? Only for your king that you brought back to look at you and shout, Anglo-Saxon filth, and slice you in half. This guy was freaking ruthless, and Granny knew this because King Arthur protected England from invaders, Anglo-Saxon invaders. Anyone with their blood was fair game. He butchered everyone in this room. Everyone but this little lady. She offered up her hand for her blood to be tasted, and he tasted it, realizing that she was his kin. He smiled. You have come to your king. Watching all this play out, Granny was terrified because this was not what she expected. The king was back, and with his power, he demanded or called upon an undead army, equipping them with armory and weaponry. They were his knights. Rather, they were his foot soldiers, and they would die for him. But the little lady had prepared a knight for the king, a knight that would go look for the Holy Grail. And once Granny heard the Holy Grail, she had to get the hell out of there because that was another thing. That was a doomsday weapon. But she couldn't escape properly because her grandson kicked some rocks, gaining the attention of the king. Now they had to fight. But her grandson wielded a machine gun, so he just let the bullets fly. Granny, on the other hand, had some C4, a magical pack of C4. They had to run. Realizing that his granny was slow, he just said, nah, come here, picking her up. He ran with all of his strength. While Granny just blew up the freaking C4, which engulfed the whole cave, stopping King Arthur from coming out of this cave. But he wasn't bothered. He was disgusted at this weapon. That is not a weapon for a king. He opened up a portal and stepped through to go get his real weapon, Excalibur. Right now, they needed help. Granny needed a doctor, but not just any doctor, a doctor of history. But funny enough, Duncan's date was a doctor in history. And as you realize, destiny is real in this world. So that was no coincidence. Granny just said, let's go get her in your piece of shit car. She was rude, but that is why I like her. On their way to Rosie's apartment, she opened the door saying hello, but Granny had a Glock to her face because you're going to do as I say, or you're going to die. She really wasn't going to kill Rose, but she just liked pulling out the gun. So nobody has a reason to waste time. And she took them down to the catacombs where a chest was hidden. A chest directly stated for the next doctor. Granny needed Rose to see the contents of this box so she could just follow the mission without questions. And she opened it, only to find a letter addressed to her, saying, "Believe this woman. Everything she says is true. Don't waste time." Because right now, time was important. They had to go fight, or the world they knew would end. Stepping into the holy ground, she gave Rose a candle and told her never to let it die. Because right now, she's the string that connects her and Duncan to the real world, just like Theseus and the Tread. Right now, Duncan and her had to stop King Arthur from getting the sword, but they were too late. King Arthur was already there. Every single thing that could possibly go wrong has gone wrong. And right now, with one grip, he put out his magical sword, which transformed him and imbued him with power. He was in his final form, and he looked badass. And right next to him stood the pretty little lady and her son, the new knight. Granny saw this and realized that this was a make or break moment. Because he was pledging his loyalty to his new king, she had to stop him. Pulling out the box from Duncan's bag, she told him to hold still. He asked his grandmother, why is this grail so important? She made it clear that the grail is a catalyst for stories, and this world is haunted by stories. Every single story you have read is real. And once that grail comes to life, all of them come alive. So Duncan, please hold still. Don't make Granny lose her shot, aiming for this innocent kid's head. Grandmother doesn't play at all. When it's time to take the shot, she will take the freaking shot. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and this is Once and Future, the story about stories. And we pick up where we left off in the last issue, with Granny about to take this poor kid's head off. For those of you who are confused, check out my Once and Future playlist in the description below. Back to our story. Rose was waiting for them outside the building, wielding a freaking candle. As Granny explained, that candle will be the only means for them to find their way out. But right now, it was at risk because of the cops that came through, telling her to turn off the candle, and what was she doing here? But inside this building, inside the magical world that resided in this building, Arthur, the new Demon King, was knighting his new Galahad right now. And Granny knew she had to take the shot because he was not allowed to be knighted. But sadly, his mother was in the way of the shot, so she didn't take it, and he was knighted. And his task was simple: find the Holy Grail. Holy Grail was an enchanted item that would bring magic back into this world. And that was a bad thing because magic comes with monsters. But it is quite clear that most of Arthur's soldiers do not trust this Galahad. But his mother made it clear that he is Galahad through and through, raised to believe he was Galahad. And the story only looks for one string to connect. Once you act and call yourself Galahad, you are the Galahad of destiny, whose sole purpose was to find the Holy Grail. And Granny wasn't having that. She was about to kill this kid. With one shot, she took it. Blam. But Duncan was good. He was never going to let her kill this innocent child. And because of this, the Demon King finally noticed their presence, and he was tired of their interference. So he ordered them to be killed. So they had to run for their life. Thankfully, the candle was still lit, because passing this threshold without it would have been impossible. And when they busted out, they got stopped by the cops, seeing them carrying weaponry. Granny tried to tell Rose to snuff the candle because she knew what was to come, but the cops wouldn't let any of them move, which was their mistake, because what followed was death. One of the zombie demon knights had approached out of the portal, and the first thing he did was take the cop's head off and plunge his sword into the second one. Duncan could do nothing but stare in horror as they died. Then Rose finally got the hint and decided to snuff the candle, which was good because she was about to die. And now, when the demon was gone, they were left with two corpses of police officers. They had to get the hell out of here or else they would be blamed for this death. So they left, and Granny was pissed off because she had the shot. She could have ended everything tonight. But most of all, she was impressed with Rose. She kept her cool. So, she was officially part of the family. Granny asked her to make a call because in one of the files she found, there was a number of someone that could clean up bodies, and they needed that person right now. But Rose didn't want to be no secretary. She was better than that. And Granny made her understand that you're not a secretary. You just hand us our missions. You're the boss. But the current mission wasn't over. Granny told Duncan to park here, and he did. And she let him know that you should get ready because there's a lot of death to follow. She broke it down that Galahad will need a kingfisher to open a portal to where he could get the Holy Grail, and the only kingfisher alive was shot in the prick. Odd thing to mention, but to come into play later. They also wanted an explanation as to why people are creating Galahad. Galahad was the son of Lancelot, and currently they all know Lancelot is dead. But in this world, like I said before, the second you believe you are a person and your story is one of heroics and honor, you will be Lancelot. You will be Galahad. Especially if your name is named Galahad or Lancelot. Granny had brought them to a place none of them recognized because this was Kingfisher's home. Rose found it very suspicious that she knew Kingfisher's home, but before she could make her opinions known, the realm started to change. A sign that magic was coming. They had to hurry and stop Kingfisher before he can help Galahad find the Holy Grail. There was no time to knock, so Duncan just broke down the door with one kick. Even Rose was shocked. His grandmother just said, yeah, that's why I didn't allow him play video games. I let him play outside. Now he is strong. Duncan wasn't listening though, calling out to Kingfisher, please come out. We don't want to hurt you. We just want to talk. But Kingfisher answered back, never. Not as long as Granny is with you. She's a psychopath. She will shoot me on sight. And he was absolutely right because she didn't even see him. She just started shooting through the walls. She was that lethal. Duncan hasn't realized it yet, but his grandmother was a monster hunter and she was the best. She has never failed a mission and she wasn't starting today. But before she could kill Kingfisher, he came. Galahad came. This time escorted by a zombie knight. Rose had just seen this monster kill two cops without blinking. She knew she had to run, but Granny wanted to fight. But Duncan was not going to let his Granny fight. Grabbing onto her, he climbed the steps so fast, but that didn't stop Granny. She kept shooting. The knight was there to protect Galahad. His mission was the Grail, and he went straight for Kingfisher, who let him in to the kingdom of magic, where the Holy Grail was resting, waiting for the person who was going to come and collect it to collect it. Galahad, the hero of legend. Even his mere presence in that kingdom could be felt by everyone outside. This was a call to destiny, and his grandmother had felt it before. He has entered the kingdom, and now someone had to go after him. But it could not be the grandmother, and it could not be Rose. It had to be Duncan. Duncan was confused. Why me? But Rose was smart. She figured it out. The person who shot Kingfisher was you, wasn't it, grandmother? Even Kingfisher was waiting for them because we discover Kingfisher was her ex-husband. He's a hunter just like her. And in a world where there are no monsters, he felt obsolete. So he joined their cult to unleash the Grail and bring back monsters so they can have a purpose. Looking at Duncan, he said, you know she's been lying to you. What is your middle name? And Duncan simply replied, Percy. Yes, Percival/Perseus. One name for two great heroes. She has been training you since you were a child to be her champion. You are a part of this. But he was never going to let her. He is the Kingfisher. They need him to open the portal. But if he's gone, they cannot access it. So he simply offed himself. And his grand just said, I told you, this is why I never brought you into this world. You are so good and innocent, Duncan. But your family isn't. Nothing hurts more than finding out that the person you give all your trust to the person who raised you, betrayed you all this time. And that is exactly what Duncan is going through. Or should I call him Percy? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified anytime I drop a new video. Now, let's get into it, because this was messed up. Duncan had just met his grandfather and lost his grandfather all in the same day. Matter of fact, all of this has been happening on the same day. Not only did he find out that the world he's living in is infected with rogue stories who look to kill humans, he also finds out that he's also been raised from birth to be a weapon. And his the woman who has looked after him his whole life, was a supposed monster killer. So right now, he deserves the truth. And his grandmother knew that there was no hiding this anymore. So she gave him the truth, raw. First of all, the only reason she never told him about it was because the truth gives these monsters life. The more people who know about it, the more stronger they become. So the reason no one in this world knows about it is because they wanted his soul. And his grandfather was a nut job. He wanted to monster hunt, but they killed all the monsters. So now he conspired to bring back the Grail, and he corrupted his own daughter into giving birth to a Galahad. Her daughter was the mother of Galahad. So all this time, that woman that always stood beside Galahad was his mother, and his brother was Galahad himself. This was clearly a lot to take in, because Duncan was losing his mind. His mother, who he never knew, was here with a brother who he never knew. And the woman he trusted was lying to him all this time, raising him as a weapon. Matter of fact, she forced him to keep his virginity just so he could be the perfect knight, Percival. But it wasn't over. She looked to her grandson and said, "I've been like a mother and father to you, right?" He was pissed off. "Why are you asking me that now?" She asked him the same question over and over again till he finally admitted, "Yes, you're like a mother and father to me." Then she shot herself in the chest. He couldn't even believe what just happened. What? But she knew that the only way he could chase after the Holy Grail was if he had a surrogate father that was bleeding, becoming the new King Fisher. This was insane. But his grandmother was hardcore. She knew the mission, and the mission was too important. So she told him to chill, gave him a note, and told him to go after the Grail. He really didn't want to go. He wanted to stay with his nan, but the mission comes first. So with all anger and all rage, he left. And she watched him running, saying, "Yes, he's a good boy." He was now in a foreign magical land he knew nothing about. But his grandmother always had to protect him, because in that note, she gave him a list of instructions. Don't wake the dragon or you'll die. Don't sleep in the room or you'll die. Do not unleash the witch in the pot or you will die. He avoided all of this only to find his brother, his kid brother, about to claim the Grail and end the world. He couldn't let this happen. But at the same time, this kid has lived all his life for this moment. He has lived his life believing he was the true Galahad. And Duncan was good. He was innately good. He had a clean shot. But he was never going to take it, because that is not how he operates. While he was thinking, he must have forgotten. Galahad came here with a Death Knight. And the Death Knight was here to kill Duncan. Striking first, Duncan was quick enough to get out of the way. But just before the knight could deliver the killing blow, one of the ghosts holding the chalice, the Holy Grail itself, asked him, "Who do you serve, knight?" And he said, "I serve Galahad," which was a mistake. The Death Knight was instantly struck down by magic, because Galahad was never charged with finding the Holy Grail. Percival was. Using the opportunity, Duncan got back on his feet, wielding the gun, asking his brother to give him the Holy Grail and stop this foolishness. But his brother knew deep down, "You are Percival, raised to be good. You will never shoot me in the back." And Duncan knew this as well, because next he just dropped the gun back on the floor and pulled out his hand, saying, "Let's fight for it." But his brother had a sword. You do not bring a hand to a freaking sword fight. Duncan was about to be stabbed by his kid brother, so he thought the best option was just to talk to him. Bruh, you don't have to do this. They raised us to be knights. It makes no sense. Do not end the world. Do not kill countless people by unleashing that grail. He was trying to appeal to his brother's humanity, but his brother was freaking crazy because his brother wanted chaos. He wanted a fantastical world and he wanted to rule over everything. When Duncan heard this, he said, "Oh, okay, I get it now. You are absolutely insane." Knocking his ass out clean, he picked up the Holy Grail and ran as fast as he could back to his grandmother, excited to show her that he got the Grail. But just before he could talk, the Grail disappeared, and his grandmother looked at him and smiled. She was proud, but she told him one last lie. There were 3 Holy Grails, and the fact that he got one has slowed down Arthur's plan, and she was proud. But right now, Duncan was not listening. He was going to save his grandmother, one way or another. Looking at Rose, he asked her to drive him somewhere, and she did, to a bathhouse to be exact. His grandmother looked at him and said, "Bruh, bathhouses and healing waters do not work." And he said he knows. He's going to Camelot to get the scabbard that could heal any wound. You don't get to die so easily. His gran was shocked. "Arthur will kill you on the spot." He said he knows, but he's not going there empty-handed. Going on his knees, he approached the bath and made a claim. "I am Percival, knight on a quest. I need to retrieve the scabbard of healing for my liege. I am unworthy and I am unarmed, but I need your assistance, my ladies. Please." His grandmother told him, "Bruh, this is a mistake." But he looked at her and said, "You raised me for this. You raised me to be good, and I hope I am." Just before self-doubt could set in, they responded, "We hear you, knight, and we offer you arms. Excalibur is yours. Go fuck shit up." Duncan, the Percival, is going to have to face off against Demon King Arthur, and we are hopeful he comes up on top. But as we know, this story is not normal. Most heroes don't actually win. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, where I talk about comics, movies, and stuff. Please hit the subscribe button and the notification button to be notified when I drop a video, because I drop a video every single day. Now, back to our story. Duncan, or should we call him Percival, has finally gotten Excalibur, and with his newfound weaponry and confidence, he just walks like a boss, because he had a mission. He was going to go claim the scabbard from King Arthur himself, the new Demon King. And with this sword, he seeks to do that, one way or another. He looked to Rose and asked her to hold a candle for him, and she said yes, obviously. And he just waltzed in, because this time he was going to save his grandmother. His grandmother told him that this was very risky. Arthur is way too powerful, but he had a plan. She made it clear that plan or no plan, you don't even know where you're going. But Duncan just laughed. "I don't know. Maybe he's in the big-ass castle on the hill." Which obviously he was right. Where else would the Demon King be? But everything was not all rosy, because Galahad had failed his mission to claim the Grail. Duncan claimed it himself. So right now, King Arthur was pissed off. And as he was about to chew out Galahad's head, he was interrupted by Duncan. Carrying his grandmother on one shoulder, he made it clear, "My king, I need your scabbard to protect my grandmother. May I please have it, and I'll be on my way." He was so confident, I was like, damn, bro is a badass. But before the king could make his own decision, Mary opened her stupid mouth and said, "Don't trust him, my king. He may be lying." Only for Duncan to realize that this was actually his actual birth mother. So he looked at her and was like, "Thanks, Mom." She was shocked, not realizing that he knew finally. So she said to him, "I'm not your mother. I am Galahad's mother. because she has to keep the front so the story could be in effect. Her conviction was that strong, she was willing to forego her first child just to bless the second one. Freaking ridiculous. Worst mother of the year. When Duncan heard this, he was like, oh, okay. Now really angry, the undead warrior knights all attacked him at the same time, but he had Excalibur. He decimated their forces with one swing, and because of his current rage level, he didn't stop. He just kept going, cutting every single person down. He was absolutely amazing to watch, especially because he was the nice guy. It's good to see this demon side of him. And the king noticed this as well. Realizing that he had a magical sword on his arm, he said, hey, I like your blade. Give it to me and I will give you the scabbard to heal your grandmother. He was confused, but Duncan just wanted his grandmother saved. But you are asking yourself, doesn't the king have his own Excalibur on his waist? He does, but for some reason, he wants them both. Duncan had to look at him and tell him, I cannot give you my king, because it isn't mine to give, but I can give you the information of where I got it from. Mary tried to open her goofy mouth and question, but the king made his choice, telling her, please shut up. All powers I give on my own accord, and I retrieve on my own accord. Giving Granny the scabbard, she wore it and she was instantly healed. But Granny wasn't satisfied. She wanted to mess everything up, so she told King Arthur the truth. Do you know who Galahad is? Galahad was birthed from the man who laid with your woman. For those of you who do not know, Lancelot betrayed King Arthur and slept with Guinevere. And this version of King Arthur predates that very same knowledge. So he doesn't know. He still thinks his wife is loyal. So when Granny aired his dirty laundry, Mary heard it and was afraid. She told her to shut up, but the truth had already been revealed. King Arthur processed this and became enraged. A Frank has laid with my queen. I shall have his head. Turning to Mary and asking her point blank, where is Lancelot? Tell me now, and your transgressions will be forgiven. Don't tell me, and I shall split you in half where you stand. Mary was absolutely terrified. She called to her son, Galahad, let's get the hell out of here. But her son was raised to believe he was a knight, was raised to be perfect. He said, I will never leave my king. He turned on his own mother. Jesus Christ. Mary can't catch a break. And King Arthur wasn't playing. He was prepared to split her in half. But thankfully, Duncan was there. And Duncan was good, protecting his mother. But as soon as they clashed blades, she took off because she didn't give a flying fuck about Duncan himself. Granny saw Duncan fighting for his life, so she removed the scabbard and threatened to throw it off. Matter of fact, she actually just threw it off. So King Arthur was forced to stop fighting and chase after it. And because of this tiny information provided, reality started to warp. The story started to change. Now, King Arthur was a real demon king. He even looked the part with his forces and his kingdom. Granny offered Mary her hand to come along. Mary, her own daughter, only saw Granny with a gun, knowing full well that her mother has killed a lot of people and shot her own husband in the crotch. Mary decided to stay here because anywhere would be better than getting shot by your mother. But Duncan, he wasn't waiting. He just took his grandmother and escaped. They were safe now. And Rose was quick this time because she turned off the candle ASAP. Duncan returned the sword, but his grandmother told him point blank, you really didn't have to. But he looked at her and said, I am not you. Thanking Rose for her time and the messed up day, he just left because the woman he thought he could trust broke his heart. And right now, in the forest where they were returning all their weapons, he made it clear that their relationship is broken without reproach. She made it clear that you cannot leave this. You're part of the family business now. And he made it clear, I will be part of the family business, but not with you. We are done. And just as he was going, the questing beast appeared, about to take his head off. But his grandmother just tossed in the spear, and he chucked it, and it went like a missile, piercing the monster's head. She was impressed because this was a boss move. But right now there's work to be done. So he picked up the spear and they both left the forest. But with Mary though, she was running through limbo with nowhere else to go till she was stopped by someone. This person was a legendary figure of magic that was based in the story of King Arthur. And he told her, we don't need a Mary. What we want is a Nimue. And if you've watched Hellboy, you know Nimue is the queen mother of demons and monsters. And this individual was Merlin himself. This story is about to get good. I did tell you we'll be back, right? We're back with the Noah, Dan Mora, Once and Future comic. If you're confused about anything I say, go check out my previous video on this beautiful story. Once and Future is a story about stories, a world where stories once uttered become real. And our main character's name is Duncan, also called Percival, because they wanted him to be a hero. And like I said, once uttered becomes real. And we continue where we left off in the last video. King Arthur is extremely disappointed. Not only did he find out his shorty actually had an affair with Lancelot to give birth to Galahad, this prick, he also lost the Holy Grail because of this prick. So he decided to bless this Galahad with the opportunity to sit in the Siege Perilous. For those of you who do not know, the Siege Perilous is a throne-like seat where only a true pure of heart knight could sit down to find the Holy Grail. And like I said, this prick was not pure of heart at all. He walked up to it so confident, claiming he was the best, and he sat down, forgetting that pride is also a sin. He was transformed into something unrecognizable, but more on that later. Back with Duncan though, Duncan had just killed a pixie. I mean, it's so funny because he looked so traumatized. The pixie was killed with the help of his grandmother who recommended iron. If you watch my last video, you know him and his grandmother are not cool. So the second Rose called, he cut the phone with his grandmom and picked the phone with her because she had another mission for him. Granny was kind of hurt, but she was going to get her lick back. Right now, Duncan had heard from Rose and she told him that something magical was about to happen and he needs to move fast. So he did, moving to his new adventure. But Granny called Rose to find out where he was going. He needed backup, and she was uncomfortable that he was in the field alone. He was sent to this museum by Rose herself, gifted a freaking gem that would direct him to anything magical. And it did its job, directing him up the stairs into some passageways directly at the helmet. I'm sure you're asking yourself which helmet. Well, an Anglo-Saxon helmet. It pointed directly at it. But the thing is, Duncan was not alone because the Demon King has sent someone. The Demon King sent Galahad, new and improved Corpse Knight. Mind you, for those of you that don't know, this is also his brother. A brother he's never known, never loved, never grew up with. Galahad was different. He was disgusting. Literally maggots and pus were pouring out of his body. But when Duncan asked him, how are you like this? Why are you? Galahad completed it, I am perfect, launching an attack on his brother. Thankfully, Duncan was quick on his feet, so he stepped out of the way, pulling out his Glock and unleashing some shots. Galahad was fast though because he was literally riding on a demon horse. While they both did battle, someone was in the museum as well, stealing a manuscript. That will come into play later, but right now, Galahad was about to kill his brother. But thankfully, before he could, grabbing a hold of his brother's head about to smash it in, Granny came through. I told you she was going to get her lick back. She told Duncan to get out of the way. Because for those of you who don't know, Granny is with the smoke. She was honestly one of the best hunters in history, doing most of her hunting with traps. She was really good at laying traps, and today was no different. She laid out a line that was razor sharp and taunted Galahad to attacking, and when he did, he was split in half, him and his horse. In one fell swoop, he lost his beast and his legs. He was calling Granny a monster, but Granny just walked up to him and said, "Hi, I'm your grandmother. Goodbye." Before she could blast him in the head, he was gone. teleported with magic. Duncan was glad to see his grandmother was still alive, but there was no time to rest because Rose called him to tell him there was another break-in and a manuscript was stolen. A manuscript of Beowulf himself. This is when we see who actually stole the manuscript. It was Mary, Granny's daughter, the mother of Galahad. Yes, the same Galahad that was just split in half. She was chanting a spell on a big hill, calling to someone that was going to come here and help her out with her deceitful plan. Someone tearing the ground like he was coming straight from hell. She was calling Beowulf himself. Granny and Duncan were able to track down Mary, but they didn't know it was her, looking for what she let loose on this planet. Duncan thought to himself, maybe it was Beowulf, but Granny said no. Poems could not come to life. She was so wrong. Back in King Arthur's demon castle, though, the hand was bleeding to death, and he was afraid to die, but King Arthur promised him, you sat on the siege perilous. You're not going to die. But someone interrupted this moment. Someone strong enough to walk through the king's demon knights with no harm coming to him, shouting and demanding, who is the king of this castle? Beowulf is here. And King Arthur wanted the smoke. Beowulf wanted the smoke. Both of them wanted to see who was stronger. So both of them attacked with all of their strength. One demon, one from hell. But at the core of the story, King Arthur was a knight. Beowulf was a savage, headbutting King Arthur back. He said, come on, king, bring it on. And King Arthur shouted, you will die for that. About to attack when they were both stopped by a man of magic. Merlin came bowling through, telling Beowulf that he is not the enemy. The enemy is out there. The enemy did that to Galahad. As soon as he looked at Galahad, he was pissed. Who did this to you? I shall kill that person with my bare hands. King Arthur was in silence, watching all of this play out. He just let it play because he didn't want to face this lunatic. Not right now, at least. But he looked to Merlin. Who are you? And why are you helping me? Merlin introduced himself, but King Arthur said, I do not know your name. This is because throughout history, a bunch of stories have been told with Arthur. And in this particular one, Merlin was not mentioned. So when he came back, he did not remember who Merlin was. But Merlin was still loyal. Merlin was still King Arthur's wizard to command. Back in the field though, Granny and Duncan decided to pack up. But they were being watched by Mary herself, the sickle witch who sacrificed both sons for her agenda. Pulling out a bunch of twigs, she tossed them to the wind, and a message was laid on the floor, clearly from Merlin, saying, good, await my command. But she wanted to know about her son. How was Galahad? And he replied, he is well. She was at peace, but Granny and Duncan were about to be in war because they called Rose, hoping for another mission. But she just made it clear that something was coming towards them, something close. She asked for a moment to check again, and when she checked, it was closer than ever. It was right on top of them. And we see someone on fire jumping directly at the car. That someone was Beowulf himself, and he wanted violence. Punching his way through the car, Granny was with the smoke because she shot back, but she missed every single shot. Duncan asked his grandmother, what do we do? But she just told him to drive. And Beowulf looked in a hole and was like, nah, you ain't going nowhere, tearing off the roof and saying, Beowulf has you now. Granny and Duncan have the fight of their lives the next video. Stay tuned. What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. As promised, the continuation of yesterday's video starts today. It gets crazy. Trust me, you would want to stick to the end. My name is Ifai, and this is Once and Future by the amazing Dan Mora, and a story about stories. So sit back, relax, hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications for when I drop another video. Let's go. Beowulf was absolutely going crazy. This was what he found to be fun. Chaos, violence. That was the type of person he was, the type of hero he was. Or at least this is the type of hero we are getting. He was about to kill Duncan and his grandmother, but Duncan was smart enough to realize that Beowulf was no ordinary man. So the only option was to flip that car, and he flipped it. He flipped it so well, the car crushed Beowulf under it. It was such a dangerous move that Duncan and his grandmother had to have been hurt in this crash. It was that devastating, and Beowulf was supposed to be dead, right? There was a long pause, a long silence before we see Duncan and his grandmother actually alive. He helped her get out of the crash, and he was happy, only to turn around and see Beowulf standing there. This demonic man was ready for action. He was on Freddy Krueger mode, and Duncan had no other options but to face him. His grandmother actually told him that he should while she sets up a trap, because as you know, she's a perfect hunter, or at least she was. So she tossed Duncan the spear and told Duncan, "You have no other choice." And Beowulf just stood there, looking like an absolute demon, calling Duncan out, saying, "Come forth, hero. Let's battle it out, man to man." By the look of things, Duncan was absolutely terrified, but he had no other option, so he attacked. He attacked with the freaking spear, while his grandmother looked for a bomb, which she found. But this was Beowulf. Spear or not, he just flicked that stuff to the side, grabbed onto Duncan. He was about to fatality this dude, saying Duncan had two good arms. He wants one. Stretching him out, he was about to split him in half till he was shot. Granny was not going to let anybody take her grandchild from her, or at least not Duncan, because we know what she did to the other grandchild. She called to Duncan, telling him to run towards her, and Duncan did. Seeing the tripwire, he jumped over it, expecting Beowulf to trip over it and cause the trap to explode. But nah, Beowulf was no fool, and everyone was kinda shocked. They expected him to be a fool. Beowulf just picked out the bomb, which was very dumb because he was practically on fire, taunting them. Duncan saw this and just said, "Yeah, you're smart, but can you catch a bullet?" He shot directly at the mine, which exploded in Beowulf's arms. They were exhausted. This was a night they really wanted to forget. And Duncan had lost the car, and he didn't have insurance. Without a car, they made their way back to the home to drop off his grandmother, and his grandmother asked him what he's going to do next, and he said he just wants to sleep. He hasn't slept since he started this whole family business, and he just wanted to rest. Understandable. But the thing is, heroes should never rest, because when they do rest, their enemies are at work. And Mary, his own mother, was at work. She was an enemy. Stepping into a haunted house, we see the spirits that was haunting this house was actually Merlin himself. He was pissed off that King Arthur did not know who he was. It frustrated him. Like I explained before, the stories of this world come to life, and this King Arthur is brought to life by a story that didn't really involve Merlin, so he doesn't know who Merlin is. Or Mary didn't care, she just wanted to know about her son, Galahad. Merlin was like, "Bruh, chill out. Everything is going fine." And right now, Beowulf is dead, so the monster comes next. Back in the home though, we see that Granny had just got in, and everybody is surprised because she's a bit chipper than she usually is. Everyone knows she's very annoyed all the time, but she looks happy. And this is when we find out that she's only happy when she's hunting with her grandchild. She loves to kill. Monsters to be exact, not people. And Rose was having a cool night too. So she decided, just for the fun of it, let her do her thing and scan for trouble, only to realize that there was trouble closer than she could possibly imagine. So close, she had to make a call to Duncan. And when Duncan heard, he ran outside. His car was all messed up, so he had to call an Uber. Imagine being a hero without a car. He was understandably pissed off, but there was no time to be pissed off. Mary had tracked a monster that was about to appear at nowhere but his grandmother's home itself. It started to pour rain, and we see a monster's gigantic hand stretch out, crushing the gardener's head. This monster was the Grendel, and it was here because of Beowulf. If you know the stories of legend, you know why it is here. It is considered a monster of destiny, so no one else could put it down but Beowulf himself. And Beowulf was dead by Granny's hand, so he was here for her. Duncan tried to call, but nobody was picking up, and his Uber cancelled. His life sucked. So he did the next good option, stopping a car by himself in the middle of the road, asking the driver for help. The driver said, nah, that place is too far. So Duncan learned from his grandmother, pulling out a Glock and telling the driver, you are going to take me where I want to go, okay? But there was no time. The monster was already here, and Granny noticed the world start to shift. Because when magical beasts appear in reality, the world starts to shift. You feel like you're tripping. Everyone felt like they were tripping, and Granny went to the reception just to find out if they had a gun. And when there was no gun, she said, "Oh, young man, would you come along with me?" And when he did, the monster came through. She saved the receptionist from death because the Grindle was just here to eat. He was hungry. Duncan was on his way, moving as fast as he could while threatening a taxi driver, calling Rose. Rose asked him whether she should call the cops, and he said, "Please do. This is no time for secrets. My grandmother is about to die." And she really was, because she was hiding in the kitchen watching all of her friends die in the hands of the Grindle. Even the receptionist saw all this take place and he wanted to shout, but grandmother was like, "Nah, shh, shh, shh. Don't make a sound. Just shut up and let me work." And she went to work, tossing a lot of cheese inside a pot to melt and grabbing the sharpest knife she could find. She was ready for action. The receptionist saw all of this and was like, "What are you doing? You're too old for this." But she was like, "Bruh, I've been killing monsters since before you were born, and I sure as hell will be killing a lot more when you're gone. So shut up and get out of my way." She stepped into the hallway like a beast and called to the Grindle, "Come get me. Come get me now." And the Grindle chased her directly into the kitchen, where a hot, boiling pot of cheese was grabbed by Granny and tossed directly at the Grindle's face. It melted his face instantly. It was a puddle of blood and cheese. The Grindle was pissed, and Granny used the opportunity to run away. It didn't help. He already had her scent. She just motivated him to kill her a lot sooner. And Duncan was really trying his best to call someone. He was calling anyone, but nobody was picking up. Granny found a way into a closet that was blocked off. She thought she could hold it closed with a bunch of her friends, but that was not going to help. This guy was basically the Hulk. With one hand, he crashed through the door and swiftly grabbing Granny, he was about to eat her up with one bite till the cops showed up. If you know this cops, you know what the hell I'm talking about, because this was Shaun of the Dead, and he couldn't handle what he just saw. Instantly, he was chopped in one bite. His friends tried to lay down cover fire, but there was no point. This thing was just here to eat, and it ate. And when he was done with them, he turned to Granny. Granny knew, shit, I really wish I didn't kill Beowulf. You are about to witness an absolute masterclass in monster hunting. A grandmother and her grandchild take down the mother of monsters and her beastly son. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and this is Once and Future, the story about stories. Now let's get into it. We begin our story at King Arthur's castle. Screams could be heard from the hallway. This is because Galahad is getting his legs reattached in an absolutely gruesome way. But the thing is, they're not just fixing his legs, they're improving them. But more on that later. Right now, Granny is about to die at the hand of the Grindle, who had single-handedly decimated a police force sent to stop him. While everybody was overreacting, Granny just said she needed a weapon, and she took a knife and just started walking directly at the Grindle, acting like she was pissed off that he made a mess. And when she was close, she said, "What's that? There's something in your mouth." Looking closer and closer till she was literally inches from his face. Then she launched her attack directly into his throat, telling everyone to run. And everyone did run. And at that moment, we see Duncan and the taxi driver pull up. Duncan commanded him to ram that thing, and he did, without stopping. But the Grindle was just way too powerful. This ain't no Beowulf. He just flipped the car, and Granny was pissed off because she thought he hurt her grandson. Well, her grandson is safe. Matter of fact, her grandson was protecting her this whole time by tying himself to the monster's leg. But the Grendel was not impressed, flicking him directly at his grandmother. But this was no time to be on the floor. They had a monster standing right in front of them. They had to fight. So grandmother did like she always did. Duncan, hold him off while I get some weapons. She went to the shed, and Duncan was about to get swallowed. Literally, the monster was swallowing him slowly. But thanks to the knife left by his grandmother, he had a weapon. So he stabbed and stabbed continuously till he was freed. But when he was freed, his grandmother was there, wielding a freaking chainsaw. She went to town, slicing and dicing till she took the monster's arm. He was forced to retreat and died alone in the forest. But if you know the story of Beowulf, you know that's not how this story ends. From the bushes, we see Mary watching all this play out. She knew she had to play a move, and this was the perfect opportunity, letting Merlin know what was up, saying to her, just stand watch. Mary was not just standing watch. Back at the home though, Granny promised everyone it was safe, but she was covered in blood. She wanted to explain everything to everybody, so she told everyone to assemble in one of the empty rooms. But just before she could come in, she was stopped by the actual police, a new batch. And what they saw were mounting of corpses of friends they knew, and a granny wielding a freaking chainsaw, covered head to toe in blood. Instantly, they arrested her and Duncan. But as soon as they arrested her, they got a call saying release them. Somebody had their back. But Granny was pissed off at Duncan. Why in God's name would you call the police? The more people that know these stories, the more powers the story has. Regular people are sheep. Me and you were sheepdogs. We're here to protect the sheep from the wolves. And the rogue stories are wolves. As soon as she got upstairs, she just told everybody, forget what you saw. You didn't see anything. You all have dementia. And instantly, all of them started thinking they have dementia. But one person could see the truth. One person made it clear that that was Grendel. But before he could finish his sentence, he was gutted. A big, gigantic monster hand busted through his chest. Something was here. Something wanted blood. And we see that something is the mother of monsters. Instantly, everybody decided to get the hell out of there, but the taxi guy was too slow. The mother of monsters pounced on him and took away his hands. Duncan couldn't see this happen, so he launched his own attack, which had no damage. The monster was still chasing all of them. He could do nothing, and watching the cab guy die because of his choices cut Duncan deep. He never wanted anyone risking their lives for him, and he was sorry. But Grandma reminded him that this is not the time to be sorry. We are in the middle of a battle. She carried her chainsaw to attack, and Duncan went to get the weapons. But this was not the weapon he truly needed, and his mother, Mary, was going to show him his true weapon. While Grandmother handled this beast, she was about to eat an innocent person in bed. But Granny, she knows how to use a chainsaw. She wasn't intimidated or afraid. Back outside though, we see Mary pointing a gun at her son, Percival Duncan. And we see Duncan is instantly over it, telling her, if you're going to shoot me, shoot me. But she made it clear, I'm not here to shoot you. I'm here to give you a weapon. Back with Granny though, she was having so much fun with her precious little chainsaw. The monster was taking a lot of damage, so she decided, nah, I'm out, jumping straight into the lagoon. And that is where her end would come, because Mary's plan was to make her son Duncan the next Beowulf. She was reciting a poem as he dived into the river to face off against the mother of monsters. But outside, Mary and Granny had an intense face-off. Granny was really comfortable at blowing the brains out of this girl, her own child. But she didn't. She wanted to know what happened when Duncan. And Rose explained the plan, that she wants Duncan to be the hero of the story. And he was, because while he was fighting in the ocean, he was really holding his own. That shouldn't be possible. Granny was even motivating him on the sidelines. And we see the remaining of the poem, that a hero called Beowulf, when all weapons fail, when no swords are left, he would stretch his hand and grab onto a mighty sword. And we see that mighty sword was Excalibur. With one grip, strength returned, and he took the head of the mother of monsters with one swing. Mary's plan was successful, but now it's time for her to die. And just before Granny could pull the trigger, Mr. Big Head came through and saved his mother's life again, which is weird because she never cared about him, not even in the slightest. But the plan was a success, and now Duncan had a destiny because the death of Beowulf was already foretold. He was going to die while fighting a dragon, and because Duncan has accepted that story into himself, he would be weaker to dragon opponents. And so, just like that, Mary left, disappearing like a shadow, and Duncan was left with the sword, so he tossed it back. It was not his to keep. Now, without a purpose, he decided to go check on Rose, because she was the only person he could truly confide in. And right now, he caused the death of a taxi driver, but Rose was there for him. And we see so was his mother, because someone was watching and someone got a photo. It was Merlin and Mary. Their plan was still in motion. Mary kept asking about Galahad, so Merlin was truthful. Yeah, he got torn up pretty bad. He lost his legs, but I'm fixing him, and I'm making him better. While the villains were having a good day, back at the home, everyone was traumatized. Nobody could talk about it. Nobody could mention it. But Granny knew this wasn't over. Not even close. So I was thinking to myself, do I wait to give y'all a new video tomorrow? But I just thought, why would I ever do that? You all have been good to me, so yes, I'm dropping Once and Future, the continuation from where we left off. If you are confused about Once and Future, I promise you it's easy to pick up on. Just check out the playlist below. I'll leave the link in the comments. But just a quick recap. Stories have life. Once you believe them, or once you even know about them, or think them to be real, they become real in this world. And our story revolves around a family whose sole job is to protect the world from all these rogue stories. And we pick up with Granny. She was having a smoke break, enjoying her alone time, when she saw a pretty magpie. But then the world shifted. And we know when the world shifts, it means there is magic in this place. She saw a multitude of magpies, and according to a nursery rhyme, a specific number of magpie means chaos and death. So just to even the number, she took some of them out. And I mean, she shot them on the spot without remorse. Proud of herself because she thought she had changed fate. The last two magpies just looked at themselves, and one just bit down on his homeboy and ripped his head off and said, sorrow. Granny can't catch a break. She instantly blew it to bits and called her grandson, boy, we have work to do. Get your ass over here now. This is when we pick up with Duncan, who got the information from Granny. Seeing as he was with Rose at this time, she decided to do a quick scan, and nothing was out of the ordinary. For those of you who don't know, Rose has the ability to sense when magic is coming into the world. And after the scan, they decided to go out, seeing as there was no problems to be found. They went to link up with Granny, but they didn't know they were being watched by someone. More on them later. As soon as they got to Granny's house, she smiled because she hasn't seen her grandson in a while. But she noticed something, asking him to come close. She looked at him, and she knew instantly, you look tired. What the hell have you been up to this past few weeks? And he recalled that he fought a rat monster. He did battle with a gigantic puma. He also fought a living, breathing castle. Duncan has been through a lot, and she showed concern because she loved him truly. She wanted him to find happiness, but he knew he had happiness. Happiness was standing right next to him. Granny looked at him and smiled, and she was like, bruh, I know you guys are dating, right? You don't have to hide it from me. But right now, that was not important. She got a warning, so something was afoot. And Rose made it clear that she had a premonition about something, or rather, somewhere, a bar called the Lancelot Arms. So they set off to check it out, but Granny made it clear that she doesn't want Rose involved in this. Percival, or rather Duncan, had two stories tied to him, two destined ends. one as Percival and one as Beowulf. And like I said in the beginning, what you believe comes true. So, Duncan is supposed to die in 2 ways, and if he has another story attached to his name, his death will be written in stone. Granny wanted to avoid that at all cost, so they had to tread lightly. But as we know, nothing ever goes according to plan, because as soon as they got to the bar, they asked around, holding up the picture of Mary. The bartender actually said he knew Mary, asking for a minute to gather his thoughts. They assumed he was a friendly, but he wasn't a friendly. He got his guys and they all gathered. Apparently Mary came through here and took some of their guys and they never saw them ever again. They wanted to know where were their friends. Granny tried to explain that she didn't know, but they wanted a fight. He already brought out a dagger and threatened Granny to tell him where his friends were. Duncan, the little hero, tried to protect his grandmother, but that didn't work out. In an instant, he was on the ground, getting beat on. And this thug was approaching Granny and Rose, and there was nobody to protect them. But outside, as someone was guarding the door, someone approached. Someone hailed, saying, "Hi, do you want to play a game?" The guardsmen said, "No, get out of here. You want no part of what's happening inside." But before he could complete his sentence, an axe, a great big axe, split his head in half. He was dead in an instant. Walking into the bar, this same individual tossed the head of the guardsman at one of the men and asked again, "Hail, who wants to play a game with the freaking Green Knight?" This Green Knight was a menace to society. He looked like a demon on timing, and he asked the same question over and over. Who wants to play a game? The leader of the gang heard this and went ballistic. "You just tossed me the head of my mate. We don't want to play a game. We want to kill you." And they attacked. But this is how you know drunk people. This guy just tossed you the head of your friend. He was a behemoth wielding a gigantic battle axe, and you charge him unarmed? Jesus Christ, he went to town. With one swing, he took skulls. You could see the outright joy in his face as he licked his battle axe clean of the blood, as he stepped forward saying, "This is a game, most bloody." The bartender whipped out a shotgun, hoping to put this behemoth down, but he just ate the shot and split the bartender in half. His next swing tore out the guts of the leader of this group, and he wanted more. He needed more. And Duncan knew there was only one way to stop the Green Knight. Someone had to play a game. But Duncan already had 2 stories attached to him. If he took another, that was certain death. So Rose came forward and said, "I will play your game." The Green Knight saw her and said, "Brave." Giving her his gigantic axe, Rose did what she needed to, plunging the axe directly in the Green Knight's skull. He went down hard. The game was set, and he arose, smiling, an amazing strike. Ripping the axe from his head, he smiled at her and told her, "See you in a year," and simply walked out. Granny made sure to say goodbye, but Duncan was pissed. Why in God's name did you do that? But Rose simply reminded him, "You have 2 stories. You cannot take a third." Duncan was pissed off. What was that? Why is he here? But Granny explained that this is like steam and a kettle. Something is boiling up from beneath the ground. She needed information. That is when she noticed that the biker leader was alive. Duncan went in to check on him, but he was done. His guts were already out. So Granny said, "Move. Let me talk to him." He was scared. He thought Granny was going to torture him. But she just sat down next to him and told him, "Little lad, you're dying," apologizing for his loss, telling him if there is a hell, you are going there, because she is sure he was a bad person. He looked at her with sadness in his eyes and said, "I don't want to die." But she said, "You don't have a choice, but you can affect the things of this earth before you go. That monster is going to kill more people. I just need to know what she told you. Right here, right now, before you go." And so he did, saying one word, cauldron. As soon as she heard it, she knew what he meant, and she was afraid. But she brought out her gun and said, "Do you want me to kill you?" And he said, no, I'm already gone. As Duncan watched, he was shocked, saying, Granny, you were so kind. You are never this kind to me. But she went back to her old self. If you're ever dying, I will be kind to you. Now we have to move. She sent Rose off to call the powers that be to come clean up this mess. Her and Duncan had a place to be. But Rose was their ride. Granny just smiled. Don't worry about it. I got the keys. She stole a bike. And she was a rider. Where they headed was the family manor. They had some history to drudge up. And as soon as Rose got to her apartment, she did a quick scan, only to find out that England was about to go up in flames. Absolutely terrified, she went to the kitchen and grabbed some knives and did the exact same thing. It was worse. She was terrified. She tried to call Granny. She tried to call Duncan, but someone behind her said no. Drop the phone. It was Mary, that freaking witch. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And this one is going to be a long one, but it's going to be entertaining. I could promise you that. If you're confused in any way, go check out my previous playlist to catch up. Now, let's get into it. From where we left off in the last video, Rose and Mary have finally met. Rose being the current girlfriend of Duncan, and Mary being Duncan's mother herself. Rose was a bit confused, so she asked, who are you? And Mary simply said, you're dating my son. And then Rose finally clicked, you're Mary. But Mary clarified, it's Nimue now. Sit down. Let's have a chat. They were going to exchange some stories. And at this moment, we see the person that was watching from across the street notify his boss of what was happening. Duncan, on the other hand, and his grandmother had finally reached the family home. And they were about to enter. But just before they could, Duncan pinned his grandmother to the wall. He took her bag and her gun, because the last time they came here, she shot herself. That was not going to happen. Not this time. As soon as they entered, they saw the bathroom where the ceremony took place, and she knew her daughter had done something foolish, so they had to recreate it. Back with Mary and Rose, though, Mary was telling Rose her story. She brought out a locket she always tied around her neck, and in it we see two photos of two sons, Duncan and Galahad. Rose had to ask, why did you give up your son? But Mary clarified, I didn't give up my son. My mother took him. She was going to kill him either ways. So I had to let him go for his own safety because he was a grail finder and she wanted no one else having access to a grail finder. So Mary had to make her own. And to make her own, you need to become a freaking Guinevere. Because Guinevere slept with Lancelot to give birth to Galahad. And Guinevere first met Lancelot when she was trapped in a cauldron. So you have to recreate that scene. A cauldron of boiling hot water with the maiden inside. Granny then tossed in the picture of her daughter and we see the world start to change. Magic was coming and she realized her daughter really did something stupid. Because out of this magic, someone came. Duncan saw this person and was about to attack, but Granny stopped him, telling him, nah, you can never defeat this guy. He is the strongest knight of the realm. He is Lancelot. He paid no mind to Granny and Duncan and just went straight for the cauldron, tossing the cover off it, looking for his maiden. But he wasn't going to find her. This is when we see what Mary actually went through. Her father put her in a boiling bath of hot water just to summon Lancelot. He came, but it cost Mary her beautiful skin. She was charred. This was the world Rose was coming into. Now, it was time for Rose to give her a story. But back with Duncan though, him and Granny had made the mistake of angering the strongest knight in history by duping him with the photo of a maiden. They didn't understand what he was saying because he was speaking French. So, he did something they both understood. He whipped out his freaking sword. They were about to die, but so was Rose, because Rose was supposed to confess everything she knew about Duncan and Granny, but Rose was loyal to a fault. She said no. She wasn't even going to beg, and as soon as Mary heard this, she realized that Rose had to go. She was about to kill the love of her son's life, but thankfully someone came barging in. throwing a smoke grenade in the building. Mary was quick on her feet, so she got the hell out of there before the grenade went off. And we see it was the UK government secret service that broke into this place. They were here to protect Rose, checking and confirming if she was okay. And when they realized she was, there was a gun pointing at her head because all this was her fault. And at that moment, Galahad was becoming restless. He wanted to go search for the Grail, but Merlin told him to chill. It is not yet his time. At this moment, Duncan and Granny were running for their lives. Being chased by the strongest man in Camelot was a scary thing, especially when they made it clear they were looking for Mary. He asked, "Who the hell is Mary? I want Guinevere." And she made it clear, "Bruh, that wasn't Guinevere. That was my daughter Mary." As soon as he heard this, he went ballistic. That was not Guinevere? He was fully enraged now. But Granny had smoke screen, so she laid down cover for them to take off. And what they saw standing before them was something they never wanted to see. A dragon sleeping. And as we know, Duncan has the story of Beowulf over his head. He is destined to be killed by a dragon. And Rose was going through it as well, because she was being questioned as to why a lot of people were dying when all this and their mission was supposed to be kept on a hush-hush. He was the only government official that was allowed to know about the shadow world. The more people that know, the more monsters are born. But their conversation was rudely interrupted by Mary herself. Mary was her freaking mother's daughter. She wasn't going down easy. Neither was her mother, because she was climbing a freaking dragon, being chased by the strongest man in the freaking kingdom. Mary was surrounded. She had no means of escape. So Merlin provided one for her, filling the top with hot water. She was already traumatized, but she had no choice. This was the only way she was supposed to escape. So she jumped in. Lancelot instantly realized her presence. Thankfully, he ran to save her. Granny, on the other hand, was having an existential crisis. This was hard. She had never faced monsters like this. But Duncan assured her that he was going to be there for her every step of the way. And she was happy for a second before she realized they had awoken the dragon. They had to get the frick out of there because this dragon was demonic. Back at the house though, Mary had crossed into another world and the government official noticed. So he gave his men a warning. Whatever you see must never be discussed out of this room. Understood? But he failed to realize that one of his men was already compromised. He took a traitor into a secret world. Terrible decision, but he had to protect Rose. She was important, so he sent her off to safety while he and his men explored the other world. And as soon as they entered the toilet, it wasn't a toilet anymore. It was a castle. This was everything Merlin needed. He sent off Galahad. "Go get me my grail." And Galahad rode off to get the Holy Grail from this castle. Mary, on the other hand, awoken to the presence of a man she had deceived, and he asked her a simple question. "You are not Elaine. You are not Guinevere. Who the hell are you?" Duncan came through and saw this and tried to protect his mother, but Granny told him, "You don't point a gun at the greatest knight in the land." The government officials came through as well, and she shouted again, "You don't point a gun at the greatest knight in the land." But at that moment, someone came through saying, "No, I am the greatest knight in the land." Galahad was here, reborn. As soon as his mother saw him, she couldn't even believe what he looked like. The government officials saw him and opened fire because he was monstrous. And so Mary let it be known that this was your son Lancelot. While the bullets flew directly at their head, we see why Lancelot is the greatest knight in the land. He wielded water like a sword, splitting all the bullets in half. When he was done, he looked at the soldiers and said, "You lot are unworthy." Even Duncan was stunned, but thankfully the dragon came through, spitting acid on half of them, instantly destroying one of the soldiers. Lancelot looked at him and smiled. "You are a worthy foe." He was confident. So much so he attacked the dragon alone, allowing everyone else to escape. Everyone got the hell out of there. Granny asked the government official why he was here, and he clarified that he was just there to protect Rose, because Rose was attacked by Mary. As soon as Duncan heard this, he was angry. What happened to Rose? He clarified that she was okay, but was she really? Because we know Rose is a ride or die. She went to hide, yes, but not for her safety, no. She went to get a gun, and she charged back upstairs into her house, into another world, to save her man. Duncan, on the other hand, had a mission. He had to take the grail from Merlin's hand. And Merlin's mission was already going as planned. And Mary realized this, calling for Merlin. You betrayed me. He sent her a text through Maggot saying the grail or all is lost. So Mary sent Galahad to go get the grail. While she spoke to Merlin, she asked Merlin why he betrayed her. But Merlin simply said, you betrayed me first. You didn't kill your son. Now I orchestrated everyone being in this world. The Holy Grail will be forced to come out. Mary swore she was going to get revenge before kicking the fire out. I'm coming for you, Merlin. Everyone that knows this story had unknowingly come to otherworld, including freaking Rose. Duncan, on the other hand, had to pass through all the trials of this building, but he was still too late. Galahad had the Holy Grail. The forces tried to shoot, but you cannot shoot in this room. Chivalry is the only option, so they had to use blades. And Duncan was beginning to get good at it because he had his brother dead to right. He was about to take off his head, but Rose was in the way, and the Holy Grail asked, who do you serve? And she said Duncan by mistake. We know that is a no-no. Duncan's name in this building is Percival. But before she could get killed, he saved her, taking her out of the lightning strike. This caused Galahad to escape with the grail, and they couldn't catch him, who was a freaking centaur. All hope was lost. Everyone gave up, but Rose saw a dragon crying out in pain. And while nobody was looking, she went there and pulled out the sword from his chest. The dragon was loyal, because as soon as he saw Rose, he low-key pledged his loyalty. Now the heroes could give chase because they owned a freaking dragon. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel so I can drop more videos as frequently as you guys want. I promise. Human beings will disappoint you because in this video, we see the worst possible outcome take place. Because of one stupid decision, the world practically ends. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're confused, the link will be in the description below so you could catch up. Now let's get into it. Where we left off in the last video, the heroes had acquired a mythical weapon, a freaking dragon, and they were soaring to the skies, chasing down a demonic zombie-possessed centaur, wielding the Holy Grail, trying to stop him from delivering it to his master. And Granny wanted Rose to unleash the dragon's fire on this satyr. By the end of the day, you couldn't just press a button. This dragon was a living being. So they picked the next best option, unleashing a hailstorm of bullets. And he ate them. Back in King Arthur's castle though, Mary was here, standing behind Merlin. She pointed a gun at his head and made it clear, help my son, or you die. Right now. Merlin tried to explain that he cannot interfere in the hero's quest, but her son was dying. Her son was failing this mission, so Mary didn't give a shit. She said, help him, or I promise you, I will put a bullet in your head, and I will walk over to your king and put a bullet in his. As soon as Merlin heard this, he was like, bruh, that's too far. All this only works if the king is alive. But Mary made it clear that she's doing all this for her boy. So if he dies, all of you die. So Merlin had no choice. Using his magics, he interfered in the hero's quest, putting up a shield around the castle and chasing off or warding off the dragon, blocking his pathway. And Mary was excited. But the thing is, Merlin was absolutely right, because as soon as he interfered, the grail vanished before his eyes. Mary was surprised, but he just looked very sad. I am a cursed creature, far away from heaven. Because of my presence, the grail has vanished. And so, because the grail was no longer present, this world could no longer hold a structure. So Granny and her people took off, like literally they ran for their lives. Thanks to their dragon, they were able to get to the place with the tub as fast as possible. Rose said her goodbyes, and they all ran to the tub. But they didn't know how to activate the magic. They were still stuck in this place. So everyone looked to Granny for help. But Granny was a smart woman. She realized that if hot water brought them here, cold water would probably send them back. And she again was absolutely freaking correct. Because all of a sudden they were back home and everybody was safe. The mission was a success. King Arthur didn't get the grail. The world was at peace. And she grabbed the smoke because she had done way too much for someone her age. Looking at Rose, she asked nicely, "Do you mind driving me home, love?" And Rose said, "Yes, I would." And they all set off. Now, the only problem was the Green Knight. But Granny said, "Chill out. That is literally a year in the future. We have time." After dropping Granny off, Rose was about to take off, but Granny said, "Come in. You're gang now. You're part of the family. Let's have a freaking party." And she steps into the house. Back with King Arthur and Galahad, they were all mourning the failure of their mission. Their king was about to die, and Galahad felt like all this was his fault because he had the grail in his hands. Why did he fail? Only for Merlin to come forth and say the only solution now is if someone learns the truth. As soon as someone learns the truth, we can be saved. But he wasn't hopeful. But the thing is, he was. While Galahad was still crying for the loss of the Grail, something was happening. The Prime Minister had apparently gotten a report saying nothing happened, just the usual night. But what this agent didn't know was that the Prime Minister had sent someone with an actual camera to record every single thing that took place. Remember that agent? Yes, he was the freaking prick that destroyed the world because his simple orders were to shut up, but he came here snitching like that was his honest job. His commanding officer tried to remind him of his orders, but he was loyal to the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister wanted to know the truth so he could tell the public and get his voting numbers up. He was a prick. So to protect the world, the commanding officer pulled out a gun. He was about to shoot his mans. He was about to end his career, but he was way too slow because this guard was skilled enough to disarm him, and the other bodyguards came through and took him out. Even as he watched as his commanding officer told him this was the wrong move, he asked the Prime Minister, "Are you sure we should do this?" But the Prime Minister just smiled. "Of course we should. The British public deserves to know the truth. And as we know, the more people who know the truth in this world, the more monsters are born." So while the party was going on, they received the news on the telly that the Prime Minister had something to show the public. And our heroes watched as he brought out actual video footage of the mission they just partook, and Granny said no. And at that moment, Merlin felt it. The Holy Grail came back. And just like that, they gave their king the Grail, and he drank the contents of the Grail. And as he did, he was reborn into his new form, the Demon King in his full glory. I'm not even going to lie, I prefer his skeleton form, because this just looks like a rip-off Voldemort. But he still looks badass. And his first point of business was to go check the man who thinks he rules England. Literally, while the news report was happening, King Arthur, Demon King Arthur, appeared on camera and severed the head of the Prime Minister on live television. So now the truth was out. The security opened fire, but the Demon King simply pointed his magical sword, and these soldiers got eaten alive by actual maggots. It was disgusting. He then looked at the camera and said, "I welcome you to the new land for all true Britannians, and anyone with poison in their vein, expect death. Expect death." And he cut the camera. At that moment, our heroes lost their shit. What the hell just happened? Granny was speechless. Looking out of the window, she saw that the world was already upside down. So she just stepped out. She wanted to grab a smoke. And Duncan followed suit, even asked him if he could grab a smoke as well. But she reminded him, no, You are good. Forget about all this that's happening now. Don't forget who you are. But he also wanted to know what happens next. What happens now that the secret is out? But Granny just took a deep breath and said, what else? We are hunters. The job continues on, even if the world is batshit crazy. That is the end of the mid-series finale of Once and Future. I will be dropping another Once and Future video in the future, but for now, we're going back to something more upbeat. We're going back to DC. You guys voted for it, so I'm here to deliver. And oh boy, when I said the world ended in the last video, I meant it. The world literally ended. Currently, the world is in a post-apocalyptic state, monsters roaming free. And the fact that nobody knew about this secret world prior, they were left defenseless. They were left to be conquered. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button, and if you're confused, just check out my playlist below. Now let's get into it. So we get back to our heroes, an unlikely team, Duncan / Percival and his grandmother in a post-apocalyptic world. And we all know in a post-apocalyptic world, the one thing you need is supplies. And the biggest, or rather the best supplies you can have, are weaponry. Yes, they went hunting for guns. And what better ways to find guns than to check out Granny's hunting supplies, where Duncan killed the questing beast. Funny enough, we see the questing beast's corpse, and we're not meant to see it, but as you know, the world ended, merging Outworld and the real world together. So now they're both in reality and the fantasy world at the same time. And right now, right here, they are afraid. They are lurking in the forest, where one thing that scares even Granny herself is resting its demonic head. As soon as they found weaponry, they went to work, taking as many guns and weapons and swords as they possibly could, and they tried to be quiet. But Duncan was too aware of his surrounding, not aware of his foot. He tripped, dropping all the guns. And Granny was terrified because she knew what came after was something they could not fight. So she told Duncan to run because she knew they were coming. And if you're curious as to what they were scared of, yeah, the cute and the cuddly demonic fairies. These were no ordinary fairies though. They were fairies that eat flesh. I mean, they were like super juiced up piranhas. As soon as they see flesh, they will jump on it and demolish it in minutes. Absolutely unkillable except with pure iron. But the thing is, they have big egos. The second you disrespect them, they come for you. And thank God for Rose being smart enough to stay in the car and keep shouting insults because the fairy gave chase to Rose. And when she came back, they had almost eaten through her car. She didn't stop though, allowing Granny and Duncan to jump in. They gave chase. They wanted to eat Granny and Duncan. But thankfully, Granny had her bag of tricks, giving Duncan a horseshoe, and he provided the most beautiful uppercut, demolishing half of the fairies in one go. This was what life was like now. A post-apocalyptic fairy tale world where werewolves and vampires and everything else existed. The old people home actually became a freaking headquarters for the survivors. Half of their forces were dying for the fact that there was no other infrastructure for old people to survive. And it doesn't help that King Arthur, the Demon King, or rather the Devil King, was back. Right now, they were lost. And someone made the foolish choice to say, I wish everything would go back to normal. Granny lost her cool. What do you mean back to normal? This is the new normal now. Face it, you either live or die. She knew she had crossed the line, so she took a cigarette and she went out for a smoke. She needed to relax. But right now, King Arthur was having the time of his life. He was decimating every single person with Saxon blood in their veins, and even allies of Saxon people that shot at his face. He tore them in half. His main goal was to kill everyone in power with the help of Merlin, and the rest of the politicians locked themselves in the bunker, but they were not even worried at all. The one thing they were worried about was when Galahad came in with news. There was another king. Remember I told you stories have powers, and in this world, as we know, there are multiple stories of King Arthur. Another one was alive, and trust me, they go to war. But right now, Duncan was with his grandmother, She was going through it. Everything in her life was for this. She had fought against this her whole life, and it all came crashing down in her lifetime. Right now, she felt like a failure, a fraud. But Duncan made her see that right now all that doesn't matter. They cannot wait here and die. Then she remembered there was one place they could be safe, one place in all of this land. And Granny told everyone to get ready. We're on the move. Rose made it clear that she had to save her family, but Granny put that stuff to the side because right now she had to get everyone, including her grandson, to safety. And Duncan finally realized where safety was. And right now, we see King Arthur and his wizard and Galahad looking forth to this false king who claims to be King Arthur. And with that, Merlin opened up his eyes, and we see this new King Arthur looks cool as hell with his own Merlin by his side. And they wanted the smoke, all of it. More on them later. But right now, Granny and her family were on a journey, ringing a bell because it was the only way to chase off these fairies. And we see that the safe place she was talking about was the Grail Castle. King Arthur was never going to find this place. Speaking of King Arthur, he was currently facing off against his other half, this usurper, this fraud. Right now, he had to see who this guy thought he was. How can he claim the title of King Arthur? No way. Raising up his hand, he summoned an army of the dead, his demon knights, and he charged them with attacking this new version of Arthur. They charged, all looking for blood. But this new King Arthur had one man. He had Lancelot. And as we know, Lancelot loves smoke. Back at the castle though, we see Granny, Rose, and Duncan sweeping this castle. And when they finally are sure it's safe, Rose wants to go get her parents, but Granny was curious. Where exactly are your parents? Only to find out they were in Bath. And as soon as she heard this, she was like, no way, screw that. I will not be going there, because she knew something they didn't. But Rose didn't want to hear that. That's my family. Not every family is as dysfunctional as yours. And as soon as she said it, she knew she crossed the line. So Granny just fell silent and walked out. Even Duncan was like, bruh, why? When Duncan met his granny, she was mourning what she had lost. She had lost her whole family. And right now, Rose just reminded her that she was seen by her daughter as a bad mother. But Duncan wanted to know the truth. Why all this? Why all the lies? So Granny decided to tell him straight. He was born as a deterrent to anybody looking to use the Grail for evil. He was supposed to be the Grail finder to find it and take it from the evil hands. That was his purpose. So when she found out her daughter and husband planned to use the Grail for evil, she went ballistic. That is why Duncan's mother is so afraid of Granny, because she thinks she will put a bullet in her head, which she possibly would. But it kind of sucks still feeling like your kids hate you, you know? Duncan apologized for Rose, but Granny said it's fine. I left there to protect her, because if I stood there, I would have taken her pretty teeth. Granny left off with Duncan and said, hey, watch this place for me. And if you see any man made of water, don't fight him. You will get messed up. And we see just that was happening to the forces of King Arthur, because Lancelot was him. He faced off against 100 zombie knights, and they were not slow. They were demonic, fast, strong, and he took them out. Even Merlin was like, bro, we have to go. Galahad was shocked. This was his father. Damn. And when all this was done, Lancelot just went back and took a knee before his queen, Guinevere. This Arthur had his Guinevere. And for some reason, this Merlin is very suspicious, but I digress. Back with Duncan and Granny though, they had finally reached the town of Rose's parents. Using a sniper, they were looking, scouting the premises, only for Granny to see something that terrified her. She snatched away Duncan's sniper, telling him not to look. Why? Well, there was a Gorgon below, and with his sight, everyone turns to stone. That's right, we're getting more legendary stories. This is about to get crazy. And we are back with Once and Future, continuation of the big great war taking place between Arthur and Arthur, both demon kings in their own rights. But in this world, we see that it's not only stories coming from England that are coming alive, but all stories, including Greek mythology. The gods and monsters are real. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, where we talk about comics, manhwa, stuff and stuff. And we follow our heroes, Duncan, his grandmother, and his baby girl Rose. Going forth into the city of Bath to save Rose's parents, they decided to go in stealth. But Duncan was shocked because what he saw was a whole town turn into stone. The Gorgon, which is male for some reason, had apparently just gone on a killing spree, turning every single person he sees into stone, or killing them by normal means. This was a horrific sight to see, so they decided to just head in straight, directly into Rose's mother and father's apartment. Granny saw this building and was like, bruh, you rich, you didn't tell us that. But Rose clearly wasn't fond of this place. This place was mostly occupied by white people, and she was brown skinned. She left because she was uncomfortable. And as soon as she said this, Granny realized that she had made a mistake, apologizing for bringing that up. So they went to search for Rose's parents. As soon as they got to the door, Rose knocked on it. When she heard no response, she almost lost her shit, only to realize that her parents were not just alive, but they were still bickering like a married couple that they were. She was happy. She was actually excited. As soon as they opened the door, it felt like a ray of sunshine in her life. The apocalypse is cool as long as you have your parents by your side. They sat down for a second. They caught up with everyone's life. And Rose's father got prepared because he was a fan of Greek mythology. So he used his time wisely, making a shield out of tin foils to use against the Gorgon. But the thing is, before they can even leave, someone was waiting for them. Night dripped out in head to toe. He was looking for Duncan and Rose because both of them had respective names of well-known knights. Duncan was Percival because he was raised to be like Percival, and that was his actual middle name. Rose was Gawain because she accepted the challenge of the Green Knights. She now has a story attached to her name, meaning every other knight of the round that is currently alive can track both of them. There was no way on earth Granny was going to let that happen. She had her trusty grenade, and she tossed it directly at the knight, causing a gigantic explosion, which in some ways put them more in danger because he got the attention of the freaking Gorgon. Rose decided to stay behind, laying down cover fire so the rest can run away, and her mother was shocked. Bruh, I sent you to school to study. In what world is it normal for you to be shooting AKs, bruh? But the saddest part is, those bullets had no effect. Granny was pissed off because she had bought them from apparently a fake priest. She was a bit distracted. She didn't notice the Gorgon pull up, but thankfully she was quick on her feet. She grabbed the hold of the tinfoil shield and covered his face, shouting at everyone to run, which they did. She was actually happy for once. She thought she had succeeded in protecting everyone. She wasn't watching where she was stepping. Thankfully, she was quick. She almost fell to hell, and I mean that in the most literal sense. This was otherworld/reality, so that was the river Styx, flowing directly into the underworld. They were trapped in a cave, but she didn't plan on dying, shouting with all of her strength towards the knight, telling him there's a monster, knowing full well the knight will never run away from a monster. He's a knight. The Gorgon was already there, about to take everyone's head off, when he felt something drop against his flesh. He turned around, pissed off, only to look at the ground and see it was an eyeball. The knight pulled out his own eyeball because he loved to fight so freaking much. He took arrows to the chest, slicing up the Gorgon's stomach, letting his guts hang out, and he gave chase. Filled with bloodlust, he wanted to fight. I like this type of energy. But with them fighting, Granny and the rest found their way to escape. Back in the castle though, she made it clear that she won't be staying for long, because right now, these two have stories connecting them to the round table, so they had to dip. Granny, just to protect everyone, put everything she knows on paper, which is against her whole religion, because someone can read the book and find out what they don't need to find out. But they were already at the end of days. There was no longer any need to be hiding the truth. Everybody said their goodbyes. Rose's parents asked Duncan to protect their child, and Granny, she just wanted a photo, just to remember this moment. She had lost too many people. The only way she can remember them is through photos. She was happy and sad at the same time, because she knew deep down nothing lasts forever. And right now, they were going to a very dangerous place, the home of the greatest hunter who ever lived. But before she left, she made sure to give the chest to the nurse. He was the one to protect everyone now. Before she left, before everyone left, they were on the road. But as usual, there was always a hater watching. And we see this hater is actually Mary, Duncan's mother. As the nurse tried to make heads or tails of every note Granny had given him, they noticed a sound. Something was approaching, something very large. As soon as they looked out the window, they saw a freaking giant. He was here to rumble. But Granny wasn't having much luck because she was literally being chased down by another story, or rather another poem. A guy on top of a gigantic horse. It's not Hercules, trust me. It's just a random French poem, and he wants them to join King Arthur, calling to them, shouting, "Cowards, join the one true King Arthur now." But Granny was not letting nobody join nothing. She had a rocket launcher and she was going to use it, but the lion was a freaking fire-breathing lion. When they finally got to the spot, there was no time to hit the brakes, so Rose just charged in. She was a really good driver during the apocalypse, even if she was messing everything up, because they crashed into a barn. It was time to open up the tunnel though, and it was locked. She tried to unlock it, but Granny was like, nah, shift. She blasted the lock open, calling to Duncan, and Duncan dived in the nick of time. He was about to get roasted. He was thanking God for his day life, but he didn't know the people at the castle were going through it. They had to face a giant that really wanted to eat their flesh, literally saying fee, fi, fo, fum. The nurse tried to distract him with the bell, running with all his strength, but the freaking giant was fast. As soon as he noticed the nurse, he attacked, literally running towards the nurse like Attack on Titan, and almost killing him, but thankfully he got back in. Reading one of the notes left by Granny, you can never fight a giant. All you could do is make a deal with the fairies. Take the best cow, the most healthy cow, and make an offering. And they looked at each other so confused, but they did what she said. Back with Duncan though, we just discovered the greatest hunter in history was William Shakespeare, and Granny was here looking for a specific weapon. What she found was a quill, one part of a greater weapon. But if this was not going to help them, they had other weapons to pick from, because outside was a big gigantic lion looking to eat them alive. While they prepared for war, King Arthur's forces were getting decimated and he was frustrated. He was visibly going insane, asking for all his knights. So Merlin decided to summon the one sent to get Percival, and he came back petrified. Apparently, plucking out his eyes didn't help. He was still turned to stone. King Arthur was disappointed in Merlin, and Merlin knew this. He was frustrated. He never liked to fail his king. So he went to the stalls and he found freaking Galahad that used to be a perfect man, now taking dumps and eating hay like a freaking horse. Galahad knew deep down that he was meant for more than this, and he went off to find his real father. And right now, his brother was about to face a big, gigantic lion. When he came out, the lion was dead, and so was his rider. They thought they were safe, but Granny knew better. Granny shouted, "Get down," but it was too late. There was a red dot on her head. Someone had her in her sights, and she shouted, "Stay where you are. Don't tempt me, mother." It was Mary the hater. In a world where stories come to life, where monsters and demons are real, where goblins and ghouls hunt your very neighborhood, we see a mother and a daughter almost kill each other just because they have differences. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today we're covering Once and Future, the Great Big War. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Now let's go. We continue our story with Granny in the crosshairs of her daughter's sniper rifle, and we both know Mary. Mary was going to pull that trigger. If you're confused about who Mary is, go check out my Once and Future playlist. It will explain everything better than I can right now. Granny made it clear, shoot me, love, because I'm not sitting down for nothing. She wanted her mother to drop everything she had gotten from the vault And Granny just straight up told her, nah, no thank you, I'm not doing that. Pulling out a dead man switch that she claims was connected to the vault itself. Everything was going to go off in flames as soon as she dies. Mary paused. She was so furious, she just told her to sit down. So Granny sat down. This is where we find out that she's bluffing. She was trying to think of a plan all this time, which is when we see that the plan she had drawn out, especially for the giants, was being carried out as we speak. The nurse had taken the best cow they had to the forest of the fairies. If you're confused, check out my previous video. I explain it further there. The fairies love meat, and he brought this meat, or rather this cow, as an offering. As soon as the fairies saw it, they say, yeah, the cow is nice, but we also like human flesh. He ran for his life, literally drenched in cow blood. And as soon as he came out of the forest, he saw the giant waiting for him. Dude can't catch a break. And in his hand, the fairies apparently gave him 3 bean seeds. As soon as he saw this, he was pissed off. What? I'm going to die for beans? And he threw it on the floor, only for the seeds to bloom, instantly killing the giant with his big, strong tentacles. That's when he realized a giant, a cow, and a trade. Jesus Christ, I'm Jack and the Beanstalk. Because I'm guessing his name is literally Jack. Back with Granny though, we see Mary just wanted a way. She wanted a way to carry out her revenge against everyone who has wronged her. So Granny gave her the castle, literally where everyone was staying safe right now. As soon as Mary heard this, she lost her shit. You're insane. But Granny just clarified, of course I am. But you need it. And right now, everything you're doing is for your son. And we see Rose's face change because everything she's doing currently was for her son, who was once a beautiful boy, but now was a horrible, terrifying monster. And speaking of this monster, he thought he was smart to go look for his father, and he found him. Lancelot, he tracked him all the way over here and asked, do you remember me, father? And he said, of course, that witch convinced me you were my son. He was excited at first until Lancelot said, you ain't Galahad though. This is Galahad. And we see the perfect Galahad step forward in his shining armor. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, can I hunt this monster? And Lancelot said, yes, of course. And I will hunt him with you. Bruh, they started chasing Galahad, or rather the fake Galahad, the monstrous Galahad around the forest like a freaking animal. Very harsh indeed. So honestly, Mary's vengeance was warranted, and she wanted everything she could get. But her mother looked at her and apologized. I'm sorry. This was your choice. You have to live with it. Some things cannot be fixed. But I promise you, if you let me go, I will mess every single person up that messed with you. And I promise. So she let her mother go because she knows she keeps her promises, especially if it's promises of violence. It doesn't help her sadness though, because she was broken. And she wasn't the only one. King Arthur finally decided to step on the battlefield himself. He was tired of his forces disappointing him. But the thing is, the last battle was supposed to be held at the exact same spot he died thousands of years ago. And as we know, stories become real. It was his destiny to die on this spot. So Merlin was clearly upset, but Arthur didn't care. He still went. And Granny went to get her only, rather most powerful, maybe ally. Right here in this place was hidden a freaking water god whose story was so convoluted. He was driven to madness, a god of water, driven to pure chaos. He wanted to be freed. He screamed it, unleash me. So a choice had to be made. And the same choice was going to be made on the battlefield because Arthur could sense Merlin's discomfort. Merlin was thinking about how he watched Arthur die before. He didn't want to go through that again. But Arthur just looked at him and said, you will follow me. Believe in me. And Merlin said, of course, my king. And they went out to battle. He commanded his forces to charge. While Granny was thinking about releasing this god of chaos, but she was smart. She just said, nah, no thank you. You too crazy. And she turned off all the candles and he went back to his slumber. But she knew she had triggered his rage. and everyone was filled with rage at this moment. All the armies of King Arthur, both King Arthurs, were clashing, and we see this King Arthur coming out of his tent, and our demon king finally saw him, shouting, "Pretender, I see you." And both of them clashed their magical blades. But ours was a savage. With one flick of his wrist, he tossed the fake King Arthur back. At that moment, he called Merlin, telling him to get Lancelot. "I don't want to die." And Lancelot was cold, so was his son. So they let the pathetic Galahad go, and they went to do battle. Granny, on the other hand, made up her mind that if she was not going to have a god, she was going to get the perfect man, the perfect hunter, whose specialty was killing kings. She did that while King Arthur beat his carbon copy to the ground. With every punch he drew blood, calling him weak, telling him to show me your magic. But in the corner of his eye he saw a flash before he lost an arm. And that moment Lancelot was here, and he took the other arm. Merlin was forced to watch his king die again. So he made a choice. He chose to snitch. This Frenchie shagged your wife. And as soon as King Arthur heard this, he lost his shit. You betrayed your oath. You betrayed your king. You betrayed the love between a lord and knight, a lord and his wife. Be gone. This war is over. And they all left. As the demon king regenerated because he had the magic belt, he turned to the side, thinking the battle was over, thinking he had won, thinking he was victorious. But you have to understand, there are multiple stories of King Arthur, and just behind him, he saw another King Arthur and another Merlin. Another war was supposed to be fought right here, right now. Granny's hunter was really needed. There were too many King Arthurs. She was following the broken arrowhead she got from Merlin's lab, only to find that it was a smaller piece to a greater arrow, and it brought her directly to his other half. Before she could investigate, though, the whole place was blanketed in black. They tried to run away, but this guy was skilled. He was about to take Rose's life before Granny stopped him and told him, "Stop. There are mad kings out there, and they need to be humbled, and the perfect person to humble them was you." And we then see who she's talking about, the warrior, who was a perfect match for humbling kings, Robin Hood. Back at the castle, though, Mary had made her way here, and she was going to protect this place, or destroy it, one way or another. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and give me a tip at the end of the video. God bless you. Bye. Today is a sad day, because we have finally gotten to the final chapter of the once and future story. Most of you who haven't been following along, be happy, or I will be breaking down another story after this. But yeah, welcome to my channel, where we talk about comics, manhwa, and stuff. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the bell notification to be notified when I drop a new video. Now let's go. Robin Hood had our group of heroes dead to right, and he wasn't going to miss. Not in this range. But unlike other stories, he was reasonable, so he gave Granny an opportunity to clarify what she was doing in his forest. And she made it clear that she's here because there are rogue kings out there. But he didn't care. He was about to take her head off till she said that they were false kings, meaning they were not even meant to be ruling at this era. So he said, "I'm down. Let's go hunt some kings." But before he could leave, Granny called him too, making it clear that she also wants to join the merry men. And we see him smile so demonic-like, because she didn't know what she was asking to join. The merry men were not even men, not even one of them. All of them were fairies or monsters or giants. And it would be a huge conflict of interest seeing that fairies love flesh. Anyways, back at the castle though, they were finding it hard to accept Mary. But one thing was for sure, if Granny was going to send someone, she would have told them about it, but Mary didn't have time to joke. She was the daughter of a special hunter. She of course took down the nurse in one go. And Rosie's father didn't even have the guts to fight her. So they all just figured, yeah, Granny probably sent you. You act like her. Because Granny was a psychopath. And we come to find out that her new plan was to weaponize a story against a story. And what perfect story to use than Robin Hood itself? Robin Hood is for the people. Robin Hood is the people that hated having a king towering over them. And this was the perfect opportunity. But first, they had to pass the test. And the test was simple: knock down a freaking giant. Instantly, Duncan started digging his own grave. Nah, I'm joking. Granny had a plan. She always does. She simply walked up to the giant, kept something on the floor, and walked away. It was C4. She blew up the bridge, knocking him on his ass. And just like that, she had passed the test. But her daughter was going through the exact same test because they wanted to test if she was real. They carried all the flashcards Granny gave them and asked her a question back to back. But she was raised just like Granny. She knew all these things. So she answered everything correctly. And when they asked her who she was to Granny, she reluctantly answered that she was her daughter. Her friends were shocked. Granny told us you were dead. Anytime she talked about you, she was always sad. And when Mary heard this, she was like, what? She talked about me? All this time, Mary thought her mother hated her, but clearly she didn't. Before she could open up, she heard her name. Lancelot was calling, and he was distraught because he had run away from his king, because he had broken a knight's trust. He had shagged another man's wife. There was nowhere for him to go. And right now, everyone was looking to Mary for leadership. Back to King Arthur, though, he was crying. His forces were losing, and he was distraught, shouting in anger, I just wanted to kill some Anglo-Saxon. Is that so hard? Only to find out that this new King Arthur doesn't rely on magic. No, he was a technological King Arthur, a steam-powered King Arthur. A King Arthur who had a freaking Jaeger to fight kaiju. Gigantic robotic monstrosity was his to control and command. And because of this, the initiation service was cut short. England was in peril. Our heroes had to move. With the help of Robin Hood, they set off to take down this colossal Jaeger. This is when we discovered that because they're in this magical forest, anywhere they want to go, as long as there's a forest close by, they could just walk through it and they will be there, even if their forest is in freaking Africa. But we see that it doesn't mean you'll be close to the Jaeger, so they had to find a better way to get closer and closer. And they had a giant with a freaking bow. So he just told them to get on, and he took aim and let it fly. They went flying like a bullet, and as they crashed through, they killed a soldier. But they were going to kill more because Granny could shoot some guns. She took out as many as possible, and Robin Hood took out the rest because he's a one-shot, one-kill type of dude, and he has the power of the forest. So as he shot them, they just literally exploded and turned into vines. When they were done taking out every soldier, Granny set up some C4, and they went jumping out of the cockpit, causing a massive explosion. They had to get back in the forest though. But as they came busting through, they ended up in somewhere they did not recognize. No one knew what this place was. No one except for Duncan himself. But the thing is, Grandmother had a secret she's been keeping close to the vest, and she felt like this was probably the right time to tell them. This secret was going to blow your mind. So she called to Duncan, and she called to Rose and brought out a cigarette and put it in her mouth. She then reveals why she truly wanted them to join the Merry Men. The Merry Men had a different meaning behind them, because translating that to German revealed that the more you hang out with the Merry Men, the faster time goes. All this time, we thought they were having, or rather spending days, but nah, they were spending months. She kept this from them. They were days before Christmas, and you know what happens after Christmas. Those of you who don't know, Percival is Duncan, and Gawain is Rose. They both have fated ends, and Gawain's life ends the day after Christmas. And who came just to remind Rose that in a few days she was going to die? Well, none other than the Green Knight himself with his blood-covered axe, telling her, we have to play our game. The Green Knight is back, and we know what comes next. Death. He is really good at splitting people in half. That is the sad fate that is awaiting our precious Rose. But we see that not all things follow a certain plan. Destiny can be changed. And in this case, destiny can wait a few more months because they weren't at December yet. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe and hit the notification button to be notified when I drop a new video. Now let's get into it. Rose has seen her end. Standing before her was the Green Knight, a man destined to split her in literal half. But Granny wasn't moved. She just told her, "Rose, get over it." Duncan was pissed off. Why would you say that? But Granny made it clear, death comes for us all. Don't worry. When the time comes, we will win. Trust me. And she walked away because she had better things to do. She had a world to save. But Duncan was tired of the secrets, so he wanted the truth. Tell me your actual plan. And she said she would. But right now, she wants to get out of the line of sight of this madman. When they went back into the forest, she told them her plan. She explained how the Prime Minister ended the world by revealing the secret of the Shadow World. So the best solution would be, first of all, to unleash the god, who currently can control the weather. And then she was going to go back to Bath, which had a connection to the underworld. And in the underworld, there is a river called the River Lith that has the strange property of allowing people to forget. She was going to link the river with the water god. And when he causes it to rain, everyone will forget. England will be saved. That was her plan. Even Duncan was shocked. You actually told us your plan. And she said, of course, you asked me to. And it was the perfect plan. But for now, they had to stick with the merry men. They had to cause chaos. But back in the Grail Castle, her daughter was causing chaos herself. She had knighted one of the old people as the new Galahad, making her explore the castle to find the new Grail. She obviously couldn't, because the first thing she saw wrinkled her brain to no end. This was her first quest, so she had to battle a questing beast, and she couldn't kill that thing. She was destined to die, so Lancelot had to step in. He moved so quickly and he split it in half. After saving her, he was pissed off, looking at Mary and asking her, why are you sending these people to their deaths? Mary just said, follow me, and she revealed that she's doing all of this for her son. And this is why I hate Mary. She is so selfish, sacrificing innocence just to save her boy, whose life she messed up herself, turning him into this monster that he is right now. And then guilt-tripping Lancelot into bringing him to her, which Lancelot did because he's a dumbass. Galahad was in the forest hating himself because he was a monster now. And as soon as he sensed Lancelot coming, he ran away because he thought he was being hunted. And Lancelot was on demon time because he was moving way too fast, crashing trees and slicing everything in half. He even struck Galahad. When he was done, Galahad asked, why, father? But Lancelot said, don't call me that. I can never be a father to a filthy person like you. But your mother believes you could get the Grail, so come with me. As they both went back to the Holy Grail Castle, to beginning on his quest to suffering, you'll see. We return back to Duncan and Rose, who have grown considerably close since they joined the Merry Men. Their life has been wild this past month. They have battled psychedelic Merlins, battled zombie hordes with maggot arrows, even faced the Devil King once or twice. They have managed to slow him down, and Duncan just made time to tell Rose, yeah, the world is ending, but ending it with the right person is just amazing. We see that Granny has a soft spot because she's honestly happy that they're both together, and she just made it clear that their plan is going to go off perfectly. The only thing that could go wrong now is if there's a rightful king, and at that moment we see lightning strike. The true Excalibur had finally appeared. And now it is time for the final battle to decide everything. Back at the Grail Castle though, Galahad is going through it. Every day he is forced to do battle in this castle to get the Grail and achieve his destiny. And every day he comes back bloodied and bruised up. Every day for months he was going through it. Even Lancelot was like, why are you torturing this boy? But Mary knew that she was doing it because of him. She was trying to heal him with the magic of the Grail. And while all that was going on, the magpies told everyone that the sword was here, and whoever claims it will be the true king of England. Every Arthur heard this news, and every Arthur prepared for battle. Granny woke up to the news and she wanted to interfere, but Robin Hood made it clear that she should not interfere. The least she could do is protect it, but do not interfere in the rightful ruler's selection. So Granny and her squad went over there to protect the sword, but Duncan couldn't help himself. He thought he was the hero of this story, but nah, he couldn't pull the sword out. And they smiled for a second before they got shot. That's right, someone was shooting them from afar. They almost killed them, to be exact. But Granny heard the voice of someone she recognized, only to look up and see the government agent who had helped them before. And now he was going to help them again because Granny's plan was absolutely insane. Lancelot finally got fed up and asked him, "Why do you keep searching for the Grail?" Galahad made it clear he's searching for the Grail for him. He just wants Lancelot to approve of him. And the war was raging on. Oh my God, it was so much death, so much blood. The colossal titan was stepping on monsters miles away. The Demon King was attacking with his forces from the sky. A lot of people died in this battle, and Duncan took down waves and waves of freaking demons. Thank God for Granny, who had a plan that would involve the Big Ben. We see that this was also Galahad's final moments because he was about to die too. But finally, for once, someone was there to protect him. Lancelot saved his life and looked at him and said one word: "Go get the Grail, son." As soon as he heard that, he was like, "Yeah, I'ma do this shit." But the war had already tipped in the wrong favor. Granny and her forces lost, and the king was about to pick up the sword, but he heard Big Ben's ding, and he left it alone, because no matter what, battle must never be fought on a holy day. So they left, and Granny embraced her people, and they were happy it was Christmas Day. But we see that death will follow the Christmas Day, because back in the Grail Castle, he finally showed up, wielding the Grail. He was surprised and happy to show his father, but there was no time. His mother forced him to drink the contents of the Grail, and he was saved, turning back to his human form. But it was too late. He had lost a lot of blood, and he was dead. Mary was holding the corpse of a beloved son. And after this, she was on smoke. She went to look for her mother, but her mother wasn't taking the risk, asking her what does she want. And Mary simply said, "Revenge. I want them all to pay for what they took from me." And she had a way to do this. But her mother didn't care. "You need a hug. And yes, my dear girl, let us fuck them up." Revenge and death. That's the theme of this video, and it was done to perfection. Welcome to my channel where we talk about comics and stuff. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the notification button to be notified when I drop a new video. Now, let's get into it. Our story starts out in a lake, and in this lake, we see Mary with markings on her face. But now she goes by Nimue because she's seeking help from her sisters, the ladies of the lake. It's Christmas Day, and she needs a gift, and they give her one, and she goes on a merry way back to the king, who at this moment was losing his shit because his forces were failing. They were all dying. He wanted an edge over the other Arthurs. So as soon as he saw someone enter his kingdom, and he saw it was Mary, he shouted with all his might, "Speak or die where you stand." But she brought him something with the sharpest edge. She brought him Excalibur, and as soon as he saw it, he was excited. So excited, he called for a party. "Brothers and sisters, bring out the alcohol. Let's get crazy." While everyone was having the time of their life, Mary took the opportunity to confront Merlin, who we discover isn't actually Merlin. He is like her, someone who took a story. He was a barb who lost his king, and at that moment, he loved his king so much, he took upon him the story of Merlin and instilled on his king the story of Arthur. So the Demon King isn't really the true Arthur at all. But in the middle of his story, he feels so sleepy, he passes out right there, right then. But it wasn't just him, everyone was out. And she went straight to the king, taking away Excalibur. She wanted to hurt Merlin for taking her son, and she knew that he loved the king the most. She wanted to kill him right here, right now. But she decided not to because there was a plan. So she took what she needed and she left. Back to her mother, and her mother saw her and was proud. You stuck to the story. Nice one. But there was no time to celebrate because it was the day after Christmas, so the war began again. And the steampunk King Arthur sent a soldier, but Granny was ready, lighting him up with a rocket launcher. She wasn't here to play games. She was here to defend that freaking rock. But right now, she had a plan, and that plan had to be followed. So she called on the merry men because they had a ceremony to carry out. While King Arthur, well, he had Excalibur. So he was butchering everyone, especially this pretender, splitting him in half, looking at his corpse and saying, nah, one king, one land. While he took out the garbage, Granny and her forces unleashed a water god. And as soon as he was free, he took off running because he knew at this moment the king was yet to be decided. He wanted to take the sword for himself and become the true king of England. But he must have forgotten. He was a water god. He couldn't even lay hands on the sword. And because he couldn't, he wanted no one else to, causing a storm and electrifying that sword. No one could touch it. Merlin saw this and told his king, let's go. We'll come back another day. And they left. And at that moment, Duncan and Granny had to go back to Bath because they were supposed to go to the underworld and connect the River Lith to this water god. But the thing is, the ceremony was held with the merry men. Time passes faster with the merry men. And as soon as they realized it was too late. Rose was about to meet her maker. Standing before her was the Green Knight. She begged him, let's not do this. But he wanted violence. So she shot and shot and shot again. With a big Joker-like smile on his face, he whipped up his big axe and he split Rose in half. Rose was dead. And at that moment, her mother was mourning Galahad because his mother didn't even stay to bury him. She just went off for revenge. And we see Lancelot at that moment too, regretting his actions, regretting the choices he has made till now. But Rose's mother was too focused on the stone because this stone was a representation of what could happen, but she didn't know it had already happened. Standing before her daughter's corpse was the Green Knight, and he smiled because he did the Lord's work. But standing behind him was King Arthur, another person to play a game with. So as soon as he turned around, he asked him, do you want to play a game? But King Arthur was the Demon King. All he said was no, and split the Green Knight in half in return. But from the corner of his eye, he heard someone say thank you. When he looked, it was Rose, and she was healing. She was split in half, and she was healing. He asked how, so Rose showed him how. She had his belt, and now he was vulnerable. So they opened fire, but he was still a demon king. With one swing, he tore people in half. Rose realized at that moment, yeah, he not vulnerable enough. He was coming for her with all of his might, and Rose's mother could feel it. Her daughter was coming upon true death, which is what made her reminisce about the childhood she had. Rose was adopted, and she never wanted to know her real parents. And when Lancelot heard this, he was surprised, because he knows another person who was adopted and didn't care about his real parents. Arthur was adopted and didn't care about his real parents. Yup. That's right. As soon as Rose laid hands on that great sword, she was transformed and filled with magic of Arthur and his stories. She was a demigod. Back with Granny and Duncan though, they were going to hell. But first they had to take care of the monster. She shouted, calling forth the Gorgon. And when he came, she blew him up because she didn't have time to joke. She blew this monster up swiftly. And at this moment, both King Arthurs were about to fight. Rose, looking at the Demon King, said, come forth, pretender. When the Demon King heard this, he was like, bruh, who you trying to punk? Me? His Merlin begged him, my king, let's run away. But he said, nah, G, I'ma face her alone and show her I am the real King Arthur. Both of them launched an attack, their strongest attack. And with one clash of the blade, He knew instantly, yeah, her magic is stronger than mine. And she knew it too, because she took his hand, kicking him to the side. He was pathetic, whimpering, I am the true king. I am king. But she looked at him and said, yes, you were, stabbing straight through his heart into the stone. Demon King was dead. Demon King was in hell. Because as soon as Granny and Duncan got to hell, they saw his corpse and they were happy. Rose did it. They didn't want to know how, but all they knew was Rose had killed King Arthur. And Merlin, Merlin wasn't having it. Merlin looked at Mary and said, your son is dead. I will bring him back. Tell me your plan. And Mary folded. She folded so fast, it was unbelievable. She told him everything. And because of that, he took Mary and teleported himself to hell. And Rose decided to follow. She needed her own Merlin, but she knew where he was. She didn't even need to struggle. But back in hell though, Granny and Duncan were getting ready to pump the water when boom, Merlin came forth, angry, fuming. Looking at Duncan, he said, I know your fate. You are part Beowulf now, and your end won't be easy. You're meant to die by a dragon's hand. I know your story very well, and because of this, I will be the dragon that ends you. We see that Merlin had morphed into a gigantic dragon just for the express purpose of ending Duncan's sorry existence. We are reaching the finale now, so yes, be excited for it. And we are back with the epic, fantastical series finale that is Once and Future. For those of you who have been rocking with us until now, I appreciate you. This is probably the longest story I've ever done, so thank you for watching. Now, let's get into it real quick. We begin this video with Lancelot and the mother of our freaking king, both bonding on the roof until Jack, the nurse, comes through and tells them both to come inside. It's getting cold. Before they could even move, the earth moved. They heard a rumble, something loud enough to stun even Lancelot himself. He looked around looking for the cause of this ruckus, only for him to watch as the castle they stood on exploded. Something was flying out of it, something huge. And Lancelot paused for a second and said, finally, the story ends. And it was coming to an end. It's just a shame our hero had to die for this to happen. Because at this moment, Duncan was fighting for his life against the magical dragon that was Merlin himself. Because Duncan had the story of Beowulf, he could only be killed by a dragon, so Merlin took it upon himself to change into the one thing that could take his life. Attack on attack on attack. Duncan did his best to avoid everything, but he knew it was only a matter of time before Granny takes one to the head. So he had to defend her. He had to protect his grandmother. Running out of cover to take all the attacks so she could light up the fuse. And she was frustrated, screaming at the top of her lungs, my stupid daughter is going to destroy the world, as she ran towards the fuse to light it. But Merlin was no fool. He realized what was happening, and Duncan prayed to high heaven that his grandmother was fast enough. But before she could even light it, she realized that she had a gun pointed to her head. Mary, her stupid daughter, stopped her right in her tracks. Granny asked Mary, what are you doing? And Mary made it clear, I'm saving my son. Granny was so angry, saying, you want to sacrifice one son for another son who is already dead. And she simply said, raising Duncan was your job, not mine. I need Galahad. And for once, Granny didn't know what to do. She had no options. Duncan, her beloved grandson, was about to die. Merlin was about to kill him. Duncan was bleeding from everywhere. But he was tough. He didn't whimper or beg. He knew this was his end. But just before everything could end, his baby girl came through riding a freaking dragon. Without saying a word, she unleashed her dragon on Merlin, and the dragon went to work, instantly attacking Merlin as she came forth and looked at her boyfriend and said, boy, you look messed up. And he said, you're Arthur. Am I the Guinevere in this story? And she said, yup. And they both smiled and ran off to attack. But as soon as they turned the corner, they saw Granny about to die at the hands of her daughter, Duncan's mother. And Duncan got frustrated as well. Can we stop this killing? Can we just stop? This is pointless. The world's about to end. But Mary didn't care. She simply said, I will not lose another child. I want Galahad. And at that moment, Granny decided to tell Mary the truth. Your son is dead. You failed him. You condemned him to a fate he did not want. And now you want to bring him back as what Merlin is, an immortal ghoul, an immortal spirit. You want to put him in another position he does not want. Let him go, Mary. He is dead. Let him go. And for once, Mary let it go. She accepted her wrongdoing, allowing Granny to set off the bomb, which blew up the river lid and sent all the water above ground. Merlin saw this and screamed in rage, no! But the water pressure was too much. The explosion was so great, all the water was absorbed by the clouds, being absorbed by the river god, who didn't even know what it was. Merlin shouted with all of his strength, stop it! If you absorb that water and rain it down, everything will be lost. They will forget. But the dragon said, who gave you permission to speak? Ripping into Merlin's throat with his sharp teeth. But the message was received by the river god. Everything was in his hands now. Granny could do nothing. But one person had the ability to change all of this. Lancelot himself looked to Rose's mother and asked, what is my fate? What is the end of Lancelot? Will I be remembered as simply the knight who laid with his king's wife? Would I be remembered as the failed father that I am? He looked at Rose's mother and she had no answer for him. And so he made a choice to change his fate. Using his water abilities, he jetted right into the cloud and soared directly into the water god's presence. He didn't notice him because he was made of water as well. And Lancelot, he sacrificed himself to destroy the water god. And the rivers of forgetting came pouring down. Everyone forgot everything. All the world was turning back to normal. And both dragons had killed both of themselves. The legend of the birth of England was complete. Everyone was surprised that Merlin was dead, but he really wasn't. He was an immortal ghoul after all. He promised to do it again and just simply left. And now they had to leave. But Mary saw her son's spirit and realized that she couldn't leave this place. She couldn't leave her boy. While everyone was supposed to walk and not look back, Mary couldn't help but look back. She called to her mother, begging her mother to look at her, but her mother made up her mind not to turn. Mary called and called and called, and finally she screamed, look at me. And Granny finally turned around, and what she saw was Mary saying, look after Duncan, as the portal to hell was closed. There was no saving Mary. Whipping out the bottle with the last vestiges of the river of forgetting, she gave everyone else to drink. Rose took a sip, and so did Duncan, and their memories were clear. And Granny took hers, and the reality was rewritten. Now, everything was back to normal. Reality was changed to a world where all of them just came forth to visit Granny at her home. And when they left, Granny went back to her room, which is where she saw a photo that they all took together. And she was happy until she turned it around and saw in her handwriting simply saying, vomit, now. And when she did, her memories came flooding back. She remembered everything. She tried to call Duncan, tell him everything she saw, trying to tell him to vomit as well. But she couldn't even bring herself to do that because Duncan was happy. He was with the woman he loved. So she decided to keep that piece of information to herself. She smiled and told him to take care of himself. She doesn't mind being the one to carry the burden of what happened. She lost a lot of people. And if anything bad should happen again, she doesn't mind being the last defense the world has. Her single greatest regret is that she couldn't save her daughter. The end.